The story begins on a very peaceful day, suddenly interrupted by an erupting volcano that shakes the entire forest, even startling a dinosaur whose mouth is drooling as it looks rather ugly. The scene then shifts to a corner where someone is sneaking through the tall grass, only to reveal a group of people armed with weapons, carefully moving into the forest. Suddenly, a huge, terrifying monster with glowing red eyes and a sinister grin appears behind one of the men. The man immediately senses the evil aura, and chaos breaks out among the hunters. They try to defend themselves with their weapons, but the monster roars ferociously and overpowers them with brutal attacks. One hunter, however, grips his sword tightly and charges forward with incredible speed. With a swift spin, he slices off the monster's tail, arms, legs, and even the claws from both its hands and feet, cutting through the grass as well. In the blink of an eye, the hunter chops the monster apart like a vegetable, the creature's blood splattering behind him, a clear display of just how powerful and fearless this handsome warrior truly is. The scene changed to the fight of the handsome warrior, already broadcasting on a big digital screen to the world of Dispatch. A man stood watching, admiring the warrior with sparkling eyes. He was none other than our boy Chansu, but suddenly, a hand grabbed his shoulder. It was his boss, shouting at him for not working and for being useless while standing there wasting time. With the sudden interruption, he was scared to death and immediately apologized to the boss. But rather than accepting his apology, the old bald boss began taunting him, saying that this is why youngsters these days are a problem, always lost in strange fantasies. He barked at him to hurry and clear out the vines, nagging the poor boy non-stop. Chansu moved quickly, his voice trembling with fear, answering yes to everything. He knew he was already leaving a bad impression on his very first day, and in his mind he kept thinking about how he couldn't afford to lose this job or get fired again, since earning money was too important. Meanwhile, the old man started to nag again, saying that back in his days, even without being told, they handled things right away. With a miserable look, the boy grabbed his trusty scythe and began cutting the vines. Using his speed, he cleared them in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, the old bald man continued nagging, once again rambling about how back in his days, things were handled better. But before he could vomit out more useless praise, his words were cut short. He was stunned by the boy's speed and scythe work. The vines were being cleared just like how your girlfriend cleared your bank account. The shocking sight silenced the old boss completely, leaving him speechless. The boy finished clearing every vine, collected them in bags, and stacked them into neat piles. In disbelief, the boss muttered, questioning how it was possible that there was still a young man like this nowadays. Finally, he told the boy to just throw the trash away and head home. The scene shifted to the thoughts of Chansu, where he reflected on Dispatch, wondering if to him it truly was nothing more than a fantasy. The story unfolded, revealing that Earth had been ruined like a game whose service had ended. The planet had lost its vitality, and people were suffering and starving, struggling without resources. In that desperate time, an answer had been revealed by some nameless absolute dispatched to another world. The dispatchers fought in the other world for resources. Heroes who departed from Earth as dispatchers brought back vitality, and with it, humanity barely managed to survive. The wind swirled around, focusing on Chansu as he stood in a pitiful state, sadness etched across his face. His eyes lingered on the scythe, and in a quiet, heavy tone, his heart longed to join the ranks of the dispatchers. Yet uncertainty consumed him. He did not know if he could ever become one of them. As the sun went down, Chansu let out a tired sigh, walking through a lonely valley in confusion, wondering whether tomorrow too he would be called for work. He exhaled once more and made his way toward the Dispatch Reunion Center. A huge crowd had gathered there, the hall packed with restless voices. Chansu was shoved aside by those around him, treated as nothing more than an inconvenience. His turn to meet the owner of the center was approaching, though the atmosphere pressed heavily on him. At last, the owner asked his name. With a nervous voice, Chansu inquired about progress in the investigation regarding his family. The owner, however, ignored the question entirely. His eyes instead focused on the balance of the reunion down payment, $4,367,201, still insufficient. Without concern for the desperation before him, the owner declared that the center was not a place that ran on air and that investigations required full payment. With a dismissive wave of the hand, he told Chansu to return only when the amount was complete. Then he turned away, already calling the next person forward. The crowd pushed Chansu back. It became clear that the reunion center cared only for money, not the pleas of those searching for loved ones. Chansu had not been given even a fragment of news. All he wanted was to know the location of his family. Instead, he was shoved aside once again. A muscular man forced him back, sneering that he was not the only one with such circumstances. Chansu left with a miserable sigh. The crowd was thick, but still he felt utterly alone, as if the entire world had turned its back on him. The world itself had descended into chaos, where no kindness remained, only greed. People shoved and fought for their turns, quarreling over scraps, reflecting the grim state of humanity. When he reached home, Chansu quietly announced his return to no one, removed his shoes, and dropped his bag on the floor. Cans rolled out and scattered across the room. One can, spinning along the floor, triggered a memory, a football from his childhood. The memory unfolded. His father, once a top-ranked returner, stood before him. Their family had been peaceful, happy. His father had laughed, asking if they should play another round of football. But as Earth's condition worsened, his father had been dispatched once again. Chansu remembered how his father had always walked behind him, guiding his steps. Then suddenly he was gone. In the end, he never returned. Another memory surfaced. His mother's face appeared, assuring him she would go find his father and return quickly. She promised it would only be for a few days, telling him to sleep alone for a while and wait quietly. But those days stretched endlessly. He was left alone, crying, clinging to fading memories until even their faces became unclear. His thoughts were shattered by a sudden flash outside the window, lighting his room. Confused, he rushed forward. Through the glass, he saw a blazing trail tearing across the night sky before crashing violently into the ground. The shockwave hurled him back, his head striking the wall as he collapsed. The light vanished with a strange, ringing sound. Pain surged through him as he struggled to his feet, dazed and desperate to understand what had happened. His phone lit up. A name appeared, A, alongside a disaster alert warning of the aftermath of returner A's forced return. Another alert followed, emergency. Grade 5 returner A announces retirement. Chansu's eyes widened in disbelief. He scrolled through his phone, finding a video of returner A addressing the world. In a weary but resolute voice, A confessed he had failed to protect God. Because of that failure, every dispatcher who had gone with him was lost. He had been forced to return alone, stripped of both ability and qualification to be dispatched again. The internet erupted with breaking news. The earthquake and blinding flash had been the aftermath of A's emergency return. In the broadcast, A admitted that after much deliberation he had chosen retirement. He pleaded with the world to understand, and in a voice filled with both sorrow and determination, urged humanity to protect Earth at all costs and never lose courage. Chansu stared at the screen, transfixed, his disbelief spilling into quiet mutterings. The news worsened with every headline, dispatchers, and returners vanishing one after another, Earth's population dropping below 500 million, and the grim possibility that no new returners would appear again. His chest tightened with disappointment and despair. Failure of a mission was one thing, but retirement of a figure like A, it was crushing. The sound of a doorbell broke the silence, and Chansu froze, unsettled by the sudden disturbance. Another knock followed, louder this time, echoing through the quiet room. With hesitant steps, he moved toward the door, confusion clouding his mind, for no visitor was expected at such an hour. Outside, the faint glow of a tablet screen flickered before him, and upon it appeared an unusual figure. A rabbit, not ordinary, but one that spoke with a clear voice, asking if Mr. O. Chansu lived there. When he opened the door, the hallway appeared empty, deepening his suspicion that someone was playing a prank. Yet the same voice sounded again, instructing him to look down. As his gaze lowered, his breath seized. Before him stood a real rabbit, alive and moving, its small body trembling as it repeated its question, nervously addressing him by name. The impossible reality struck Chansu like a storm. The creature before him was truly speaking. The rabbit steadied itself, puffed its cheeks, and with a bright and cheerful expression declared the purpose of its arrival. In a jubilant tone, it extended congratulations to Chansu, proclaiming him chosen as a dispatcher. Those words crashed upon him like thunder, leaving him frozen in disbelief. Chanso was bewildered as he wondered about what was going on and why some mysterious talking bunny was pranking him with this nonsense. But the bunny was still calm, understanding that Chanso might have been confused. So the creature took out its identity card, telling the boy that it was from the World Dispatch Support Center, confirming that it was indeed true that Chanso had been chosen as a dispatcher. If he was still suspicious, then they should move somewhere else to talk more freely. As the scene shifted, we saw that both Chanso and the rabbit were walking around in a large hallway, which was dimly lit from one side as light was coming in. The rabbit asked Chanso if he had any special skills to count on, explaining that most people had at least one of them. But Chanso got annoyed, telling the rabbit that it must know he was ineligible for dispatch because the only thing he was good at was trimming trees and flowers without any mercy, and he didn't really have anything special to show other than that. The rabbit was shocked, wondering how it was possible, and Chanso was even more surprised because the rabbit didn't know this but still made him eligible. However, the rabbit dismissed the question, telling the boy that it was fine and that everything happens for a reason, and the fact that the boy was chosen didn't change, so he should relax. Hearing that, Chanso was a bit relieved, thanking the bunny, but he still wondered how he was actually inside the dispatch center because it was unbelievable, wondering if his chance had really come or not. Suddenly, both Chanso and the rabbit were standing in front of a huge stone door with its own majestic view. The rabbit told the boy that they should head inside and keep talking. As soon as Chanso grabbed the handle and started opening it, he realized that even though beyond the door the dispatch agency was there, the thing which was anticlimactic was that the door was not opening at all. The boy knew that it wouldn't even budge due to its heavy weight. The rabbit was surprised, wondering what Chanso was doing because it was just a fancy door that wouldn't open for anyone, and the entrance was right over where the rabbit was. Chanso came running toward the rabbit, but as he saw the entrance, he was shocked to the core, wondering if that was the actual door because it was completely small by human standards. Chanso criticized the rabbit, wondering if it was dumb and blind, asking how he was supposed to fit in there. But the rabbit just had one excuse, that the door had been working fine for him up until this time. Chanso pointed out that it was because the creature was a rabbit. He turned around, completely shattered, thinking that he shouldn't have expected anything good from the start and that he should just go home. But suddenly the rabbit started speaking in a more serious tone, asking Chanso if he was really sure about that, because he had failed every test and was ruled ineligible in the dispatch center exam. Even if Chanso wanted to, he would never get a chance like this again. The rabbit was still smiling even when it was being so serious, telling Chanso not to misunderstand, but that it was just quoting him, saying that either way, it would be a shame if he believed in leaving, because for anyone in the whole world, getting chosen was not that easy, and he was just letting that chance go. The rabbit had made such a funny situation serious, and now Chanso knew that he would have to do anything it took. The rabbit started walking toward the small gate, and Chanso followed, not on 2 but on 4 legs. Even when he wondered what he was doing, he still decided to enter the gate like a rabbit, not even knowing what he was doing anymore. As Chanso crawled as fast as he could, the rabbit was continuously slapping the door, telling him to come fast. As soon as he entered inside, he saw a fairly big room with enough space to fit multiple humans. He couldn't believe that the office was more normal inside than he had expected, and the rabbit wondered what he was imagining because this was the whole dispatch center. The rabbit didn't mind and immediately told Chanso that there was a world perfect for him. Hearing that, the boy wondered if there were different worlds for different people, and the rabbit explained that it was indeed true, and what Chanso would be doing was called a block-type territory capture. The rabbit smiled and handed Chanso a book, but as the boy was repeating everything the rabbit said, the creature thought that maybe the boy knew about it. As Chanso was acting confident, he revealed that he had never heard about it and was just wondering if it was some kind of weird place. The rabbit was now getting annoyed, wondering why Chanso was acting so excited if he knew nothing about anything. When the rabbit calmed down, it patiently explained to Chanso that the territory capture zone was the hottest place right now, and it was under the protection of a god. It remembered that the returnee it had seen retiring was also serving a god, and the rabbit assured Chanso that the god related to the retiree was not related to him in any way, so he should rest easy. The boy sighed and wondered which god he was going to get, and the rabbit explained that normally one was assigned randomly, but if he chose right now, he would get the special chance to choose for himself. A golden pendant worn by the rabbit started glowing as multiple cards floated in the air through magic. The rabbit grabbed a handful and asked Chanso which one he would choose. Out of the 3 cards, the boy wondered what he should do because he didn't even know which god was good and which was not. The rabbit knew that this was a rare chance and told him that a choice like this would never come again. Chanso suddenly remembered his parents and realized that he might never get another chance with his luck. He wondered why he was hesitating like an idiot when he was getting a chance that many others couldn't even dream of. Chanso decided to take the middle card, and as he flipped it around, he saw a menacing view that made his face turn pale. It was a skeleton monster with multiple undead skeletons coming out from the ground. It was so realistic that Chanso started screaming, wondering what it was. We came to know that it was the god of negation with a probability of 44%. The rabbit wondered why Chanso was so shocked, saying it was just a presentation and nothing else. The boy fell to the ground, wondering what kind of god needed such a flashy intro when a normal one would have worked fine. Even the name, God of Negation, gave him a bad feeling. Chanso didn't see any chance but still wondered if he could pick again, and the rabbit didn't even hesitate, agreeing to let the boy try immediately. But no matter how many times he picked, he always got the God of Negation. This time, the probability was 45%. The boy screamed that the whole thing was rigged because he kept pulling the same god again and again. Suddenly, the rabbit became serious once again, telling Chanso that no matter what happened, the cards were completely fine. The boy sensed a deadly aura coming from the rabbit and quickly changed the topic, saying he wasn't necessarily blaming the cards, but something still felt off. The boy wondered why the rabbit was suddenly so serious, but the creature went back to work, asking Chanso to choose fast but carefully. Chanso was nervous, his face pale, wondering what would happen. He wanted anything except negation and prayed to get something else while covering his face. When he finally pulled the last card, a different one appeared. This one had a green aura and flower petals swirling around it. Chanso was overjoyed to finally get a different card from the god of negation. Even though the presentation was plain, he realized he had received the Goddess of Abundance card with a 0.0000001% chance. He wondered why the display was so simple if the card was that rare. He knew the odds were insanely low, and if it was the Goddess of Abundance, he would have a good time. The rabbit immediately noticed Chanso's expression and asked him if he didn't like the card and wanted another chance. This shocked Chanso, since just moments ago, the rabbit had said this was his last chance. He wondered what would happen if he chose the Goddess of Abundance, and the rabbit told him that he would be dispatched immediately to the new world. The boy was hesitant after hearing that, but the rabbit wondered why Chanso was hesitating when this was his chance to go beyond. A dispatcher had to become a returnee, and everyone would admire his decision. The boy imagined himself on a stage full of cheering people while the rabbit kept flattering him, saying he might even become a savior and people would follow him. But then the rabbit grew serious again, telling Chanso to think carefully because it was a life completely different from his old one. Chanso knew that if he stayed on Earth, he would just keep running like always. He had to decide if he wanted to change his life or not. Finally, Chanso agreed. He was congratulated by the system, which told him that he now served the Goddess of Abundance. The image of the chosen god appeared, a beautiful woman with elegant yet slightly revealing attire. Everything looked magnificent. The system welcomed Chanso, and the goddess spoke to him, calling him the prospective dispatcher. As the cards started glowing and levitating, Chanso wondered if the voice he heard was the goddess herself. After seeing her, he thought that with a goddess like that, he could do anything he wanted. After activation, the boy asked where he had to go, and the rabbit flicked the air. The card transformed into a violent, volcanic portal with dark energy swirling around it. The rabbit pushed Chanso toward the portal, but he stopped, terrified. The creature asked if there was a problem. Chanso was scared because the thing in front of him didn't look safe at all. But according to the rabbit, objects didn't have moods, and if he looked closer, the portal would seem beautiful. Chanso thought the rabbit was either kind or insane because anyone could see that it looked like a deadly black hole. Still, he knew he couldn't back down anymore. Determined, he decided to enter the portal no matter how dangerous it seemed. However, before he could move, the rabbit kicked him straight into the portal with its legs. Chanso spun midair, cursing the rabbit multiple times as he disappeared into the portal, while the creature just smiled, looking forward to what Chanso could accomplish. Suddenly, a strange, static noise echoed in the rabbit's ears, asking why it had done that. The rabbit was shocked, replying that the voice shouldn't interfere because direct intervention was forbidden. The voice insisted they couldn't afford to lose Chanso, but the rabbit remained firm, saying it had followed its god's will. As the scene shifted, the system window appeared, loading. When it finished, Chanso was greeted by a message that shook him to the core. It revealed that the god's percentage on the card showed the size of their influence, not their probability. The boy was horrified. He had been completely scammed, realizing that the goddess of abundance's influence was practically nothing. Before he could process it, another portal opened, and he was thrown into a deserted land filled with intense heat and dried grass. The ground was cracked, and the trees were dead. Chanso couldn't believe he had been tricked into such a miserable situation. Crying, he watched as the system window popped up again, confirming it clearly. Goddess of Abundance, 0.0000001% influence. Chanso thought that he was so screwed that he was laughing and smiling at his stupidity at the same time, and he started looking all around at the ruins, wondering about why the rabbit told him that he was going to the Goddess of Abundance when this whole desolate landscape was anything other than abundant. But suddenly, a system notification popped in, and Chanso turned around, wondering about what was wrong with the system window again. But it welcomed our boy to the block-type territory capture world, and that the boy was the apostle of abundance, and he had to secure as many territories as possible through territory capture. Chanso was not happy because even when he was an apostle, he had to capture territories for the goddess just because her influence was that low. He decided to not waste any time and take a look around instead so that he could also find the goddess of abundance too. But suddenly, something struck his foot, and he realized that it was a sickle, wondering about what it was doing in such a desolated place, and why it was a sickle out of all things. Wondering if someone used it and threw it away because it felt familiar, which was kind of strange but still soothing. But suddenly, Chanso felt that something was behind him, and it was a huge thing, or so Chanso thought, with a glaring aura that was capable of killing anything, or at least that's what Chanso thought of a monster, wondering about why this was happening to him even when he had not even met the goddess yet, and had already encountered a monster. He knew that he could not die like this, and at least he could use the sickle to threaten the monster if the push came to shove. But just as the boy turned around swinging his sickle, he saw that the monster was actually kind of small. It was then that the boy was conscious once again as he saw a cute little hamster who was crying because of the show that our boy had put on with the sickle, squeaking like crazy and wondering if his life was coming to an end. Even Chanso wondered if this cute little thing could even be called a monster because it didn't look hostile at all, and the hamster squeaked as if he agreed to what the boy said. But suddenly, the boy turned into an evil being, thinking that even when it was small, it was still a monster, so maybe he would get something if he caught it. The hamster immediately turned pale, wondering about what the apostle was thinking, and he started dancing and crying all of a sudden, trying to somehow stop the boy from doing so, squeaking like a crazy hamster he was. And as the creature was really cute-looking, Chanso decided that he would not do something drastic because as long as this kind of monster did not swarm him in groups or do something hostile, it should be okay. The hamster finally stopped crying, knowing that he was not being slaughtered immediately, so he started jumping around and squeaking while Chanso wondered about where the creature was leaving. But in reality, we saw that the cute little hamster was actually squeaking and growling at the boy, as if telling him that he should follow. Chanso realized what the creature was trying to say, and he started running towards where the hamster was going, but still, the cute creature was so much faster than our boy, leaping bounds even before Chanso could catch up. He knew that for such a tiny thing, the hamster was super fast, and he wondered about where on earth the creature was going. Finally, after a lot of squeaking and running, the hamster stopped, and what Chanso saw was actually shocking to see in such a desolate place. He discovered water, which was really pure, and he immediately filled it inside the bottle that he brought. Chanso drank the water along with the hamster, who was licking it, and both of them enjoyed the refreshing taste of the water, as Chanso even wondered about how the water was so refreshing when the whole place was a complete desert. Even the hamster enjoyed the drink, and both of them sat down near the water spring, as Chanso started asking the hamster if he lived in this territory, because it did not seem like a great place for the hamster to live. The hamster was not saying anything, and Chanso was still throwing questions at the creature, asking him about where the goddess was, who was really, really abundant. The hamster was ignoring the boy and was looking really confused as the boy wondered about what was going on. He was licking all over his body as if cleaning something, and Chanso realized that, as expected, communication was impossible. But suddenly, the hamster remembered and started squeaking, as if telling Chanso that he would have to follow the creature once again. Both of them started running once again, but this time they took it slow, and even Chanso was curious about where the hamster was going to take him. As the scene shifted, we came to a giant tree that was almost dried up with dried leaves falling, but the tree was still standing. And Chanso wondered about how it was possible in such a deserted area. He realized that it was a really big tree, but since it was dried out, it had no fruits or flowers. It looked just like the trees back on Earth. But as the boy approached the trunk of the tree to touch it, he felt like something was beneath his feet, and he wondered about what it was. The boy immediately removed his foot, and he saw a golden-looking ginseng which had the footprint of our boy on it. Chanso wondered about what a ginseng was doing there, and it was still quite healthy for such a dried-up place. Looking at that, the hamster started squeaking as his face turned pale. He wondered about what would happen, and the hamster immediately grabbed the ginseng, hugging it and crying like crazy, squeaking like it was the end of the world. Still, Chanso was not able to understand what was going on, thinking that maybe the ginseng was the hamster's pet. But suddenly, the system notification popped up, telling the boy that he had finally discovered the god of this area. Chanso thought that maybe the system was acting up once again because he was sure that it was all nonsense. Because if he discovered the goddess, then where on earth was the goddess? Because all the giant things he saw were actually just the tree. But suddenly, the hamster started nabbing onto the pants of the boy, squeaking on, and Chanso wondered about why the creature was doing this. The hamster was throwing its cute little claws onto the boy, while he tried to explain to the creature that he was busy right now, deciding to play with the hamster later. But then the cute little creature pointed towards the ginseng, squeaking and crying, and then acting like a goddess. And then it was as if the hamster was splattered. With everything that the hamster did, Chanso immediately realized that the shriveled-up ginseng that he put his foot on was actually the goddess, and he was the one who damaged it completely. At first, Chanso was not believing it, telling the hamster that it was impossible because his goddess was supposed to be truly abundant, and there's no way that some dried-up ginseng was a goddess in any way. But suddenly, the ginseng started having itself covered in a green light, and Chanso was not able to believe that the ginseng was actually healing itself as it was alive. But Chanso knew that the goddess he saw wasn't some lousy weed like that, and was a crazy-looking woman. But then the hamster came in with a magnifying glass on which it was written in really small letters that the image he was seeing in the presentation might differ from the actual product. It was then that he saw that he was scammed, while the hamster squeaked once again, knowing that whatever Chanso did was actually wrong. We see that the boy was now on his knees, realizing that he had finished the goddess even before he got the chance of becoming the apostle. He then came to realize that the territory capture and those percentages were foreshadowing how low-powered the goddess actually was. And now that he thought of it, he remembered the flashback. When he drew the card of the god of negation, the numbers kept going up, and he thought that it was just an error dismissing it. But now he knew that the number was going up, because the influence was expanding again and again. Chanso started blaming the rabbit, thinking that there was no way that such a good card of a powerful god would keep appearing again and again, as it was really lowering the legitimacy of it. But just then, something else came into Chanso's mind as he wondered if the goddess became like this because her influence had been shrinking again and again. Now that a lot of time had passed, Chanso wondered about why the goddess was not waking up while the hamster was just squeaking and crying. Then Chanso realized that maybe he did land the finishing blow in just one footstep, so the boy grabbed the water bottle and opened the cap, deciding to give the ginseng some water first, thinking that she might be shriveled from thirst. The boy started dropping the water slowly but surely, and the ginseng started taking a normal shape rather than shriveling. The boy realized that it was working, so he poured all the water onto the ginseng, deciding to give her as much as she wanted. But the hamster's face turned pale as he saw what the apostle was doing. On the other hand, we see that the ginseng was getting refreshed, wondering if it was raining because it had been so long since she had had water. It was feeling good for a moment, but then it started pouring quite a lot, and even when the ginseng was screaming to stop, it was not stopping. The plant realized that at this rate, she would really drown and become lifeless, so she got up, screaming and coughing like crazy. Chanso was happy that his rescue was finally complete, while the hamster was crying because the goddess was not dead. As the ginseng slowly got up, being annoyed, the boy introduced himself as the apostle of abundance, Chanso. Finally, after a nervous introduction, the boy looked at the god, but he wondered about how this ginseng was a god when she couldn't even move properly, with her legs shaking like crazy. The boy had no idea about what he was supposed to do now, but suddenly, a system notification popped up, telling him that he would have to use skills to become even stronger. Chanso wondered about what the skills were, reading that it was the blessing of abundance, and even when there was no description, he thought that obviously this skill must be for making crops abundant. But then, slowly, the skill appeared, and Chanso read it with shock that he had got the D-level skill Decapitate. Chanso was shocked, and his face was pale, wondering if this word meant what he was thinking, as in cutting off heads. Chanso wondered about why the goddess was so cruel, decapitating heads when she was just the goddess of abundance, thinking that maybe she was some kind of sadist or psychotic. Chanso was not ready to believe that the goddess of abundance would give him such a violent skill, so he decided to ask the goddess about what the skill Decapitate meant, and if it was exactly what he was thinking. The ginseng immediately became serious and made signs of cutting heads, and the boy realized that he was indeed thinking right, wondering if the gods really wanted him to cut off heads. He found the ginseng had a serious face which did not even falter, and now Chanso started to reason with this weird request, remembering a Wikipedia page that he read, guessing that maybe since the goddess of abundance was related to agriculture and slaughtering was included in poetry, it was somehow included in it. But just then, the boy turned around as he heard the squeaking of the happy hamster, who was happy that the goddess was revived. But on the other hand, Chanso wondered if the hamster was included in his objective of decapitation too, while we see that the hamster was unaware of what the apostle was thinking. The hamster turned around after listening to the voice of Chanso, but this was the second time he saw the serious boy with the sickle in his hand, while he apologized to the cute little hamster. His eyes glinted with crimson red as he thought that he was just an apostle and should finish the mission without becoming too attached to something. The hamster was squeaking crazily, and as the boy swung his scythe, the creature somehow managed to dodge it while squeaking and running straight behind the goddess Ginseng, who was also shocked, wondering what Chanso was doing as the hamster cried. Somehow the goddess protected the creature, but Chanso explained that he did not want to do this either. It was all for the goddess. The hamster's face was turning pale as he squeaked, and both the goddess and the hamster were screaming with their faces turned pale. As the boy turned around, he wondered if there was something more terrifying, and he was shocked to see some mud puddles with finger-like structures. Wondering about what it was, he saw that the thing completely formed and looked like it was made of mud, with multiple openings for its eyes. Chanso wondered what it was, as both the goddess and the hamster were desperate, and it was as if the hamster was talking to the goddess, immediately coming in front even while crying, trying to protect her. Even Chanso realized that the little guy was not a monster but just a cute little creature, and instead, this muddy-looking figure was the real monster to begin with. He turned toward this filthy monster, realizing that he would have to deal with it. Otherwise, the goddess would be in danger. He wondered if he could do it, so he grabbed the scythe tightly and decided to do it anyway, running toward the mud monster. He realized he could see clearly where he would have to cut for the monster's life to end. The system immediately activated, telling the boy that he could activate the skill Decapitate after identifying the line, and the boy immediately did so, launching himself into the air and slashing the head of the mud monster with his sickle in one fell swoop without missing. For the boy, it was as if he was cutting thin weed, which shocked the hamster, turning him to stone. Even the goddess was unable to believe what she had just witnessed. The mud monster immediately turned into ashes and was obliterated out of existence while Chanso landed, wondering if the goddess and the hamster were all right. The hamster was crying while shivering, and Chanso could not believe that this little creature had been protecting the goddess in that brief moment without hesitation. Realizing it was his mistake, Chanso knelt down and put his head onto the ground, confessing that it was a stupid mistake on his part, and he should not have done it, wondering if the cute little hamster would forgive him. Even the hamster tried talking to the goddess, and both of them agreed while showing a cute little thumbs up to the boy. Even Chanso smiled, thanking Hamdel for forgiving him. The hamster wondered who Hamdel was, and Chanso just smiled, telling the cute little creature that he came up with this name because calling him a creature felt too unfamiliar when they were being so nice to each other. Chanso said they would need one if they were going to be together from now on, and the hamster liked it so much that he cried while squeaking. Both Hamdel and the goddess danced around while a system notification popped up, and the boy turned around, wondering why the system kept appearing behind him rather than in front. The system told him that the head of the monster would automatically be teleported according to the skill's effect, and a status bar showed that Chanso had slain an immortal demon out of an unidentified number. The boy realized that the monster's name was Immortal Demon and wondered why the name was so terrifying for its difficulty. The system told the boy that the teleported tribute now belonged to the goddess, and as Chanso turned around, he noticed that somehow the ginseng's color had gotten brighter and its skin had become smoother. The boy wondered if the goddess would return to her beautiful form if he kept doing this, and motivated, he bid farewell to the goddess and started running toward more monsters with Hamdel. As the scene shifted, we saw that Chanso had come to a really murky-looking place full of immortal mud demons crawling toward him after sensing his presence. Suddenly, a system notification popped up, telling Chanso that unidentified points existed and could be used to utilize the world system, but could not be traded between individuals. Chanso wondered what it was, while even the hamster looked at the system window which was visible to him. He realized it seemed like a good thing, so he decided to deal with the mud monsters first because they were annoying, and even the hamster was scared of them. The boy was thankful to the goddess that he had an amazing skill, which was surprisingly easy to use despite its power, and to top it off, the mud monsters were really slow. So Chanso immediately rushed at them, using the Decapitate Asterisk skill to clear the heads of each and every mud monster he could find. The system notified the boy that he had acquired points by hunting monsters, and as he looked at this, Chanso nervously wondered what it was. Due to all the motion, the hamster was almost getting motion sickness, and when Chanso said he wanted to hunt 100 immortal demons, the hamster was even more shocked. Chanso had killed 4 of them and wanted to do more. After the hunt, as he returned to the tree once again, the hamster was full of pride, holding his head high and squeaking brightly, as if he was telling the goddess about what the boy did to those immortal demons. But Chanso told Hamdel that maybe anyone watching the creature would think that he was the one who caught them all instead of anyone else. The hamster was annoyed by this remark and started scratching the boy's hair, which was really ticklish, making him laugh. As Chanso normalized, he wondered why the monster was called the Immortal Demon when it was way too easy to kill to be called immortal. But as Chanso was walking, he didn't think much about it, guessing that maybe he would find out more about these monsters if he kept hunting them. Meanwhile, the goddess was sitting near the tree, looking even shinier and glossier than before due to all the monsters hunted by Chanso. This much was expected from the boy, who knew that the goddess had become more bountiful, but the effect was far better than he thought. Maybe the goddess he saw in the picture would actually come true. The hamster knew something was not right with the apostle, but Chanso did not care, knowing that at this rate, she might return to her original form soon, which was more important. Just then the goddess started walking. Her legs were no longer wobbling, and Chanso guessed that she wanted to say something. The goddess came near the giant tree that was present there, standing and calling out to the apostle while signaling upward. Chanso realized that he should lift Lady Ginseng, and as soon as he did that, the goddess immediately touched the tree. When nothing happened, she wanted Chanso to also put his hands on the tree trunk. The boy was curious, wondering what would happen, but as soon as they placed their hands on the tree, a system notification asked Chanso if he wanted to use his skill asterisk blessing of abundance on the tree, since all blessings consume points. Chanso wondered what the asterisk blessing of abundance was, but then he decided to use it, shocking both the hamster and the goddess as a green aura surrounded his body from top to bottom. It was as if Chanso was surging with energy. He decided to use all the points he had earned from hunting the monsters, pouring them all into the tree and filling it with green natural energy. As Chanso was becoming imbalanced, he grabbed onto the goddess like crazy, almost choking her. After the blessing was finished, the twisted tree that had been standing all dried up was now full of greenery, with fresh leaves and lush branches along with a dense bark strong enough to hold for generations. The whole tree was filled with delicious-looking apples that were truly abundant, and the atmosphere suddenly changed as cherry blossoms began falling. Chanso wondered what he had done. He had just poured in some points he had gained, but this much abundance had immediately appeared. Even the goddess was shocked, and the hamster was also surprised, having never seen something like this before. The first thing the boy noticed was that the tree held many apples, which were a delicacy even on Earth. Chanso had never seen one back on Earth, wondering if apples were always such big and heavy fruits. The boy wanted to try one right away, but first, he decided to offer the first harvest to the goddess of abundance instead. Lady Ginseng was happy as she grabbed the apple slowly, feeling it, but then she turned serious and tried to do something. Chanso didn't care, only hoping that the goddess would regain her former appearance soon, thinking that maybe her current form was also pretty in its own right. But slowly, Chanso noticed that the apple he gave to the goddess was shriveling up as she absorbed it. It was as if a demonic force had possessed the apple, making it look like something out of a Death Note world. After the absorption was complete, the goddess left the shriveled apple and burped before returning to normal once again. For Chanso, this was traumatizing, as he wondered how the goddess could absorb such a beautiful apple without mercy. Chanso immediately grabbed as many apples as he could, knowing he had better not get on her bad side. As they gathered apples, Chanso asked the hamster if maybe they should eat too after listening to the goddess. Meanwhile, as he tasted some apples, Chanso wondered why a god who granted such a terrifying skill like decapitate was the god of abundance, realizing he couldn't let his guard down because the goddess was dangerous. Even though he didn't want to lower his guard, he tasted the apple for the first time and decided it was delicious, sharing it with the cute hamster. The apple was so incredibly delicious that it didn't seem like an apple at all, even though Chanso had never tasted one on Earth. As both the hamster and the boy ate to their hearts' content, the ginseng watched them from behind the tree, nervous. We saw that even the goddess could speak her own language, wondering how Chanso had defeated monsters and grown a giant tree in just one day, something comparable to a miracle. The goddess wondered where a monster like Chanso had even come from. The scene shifts, and we get another flashback where we come to know that the faction responsible for food supply was actually called Abundance, which was famous for its high-quality crops. This faction was far from weak, but once the Negation faction began absorbing other factions, Abundance had no choice but to flee to survive. The Abundance faction shut down its trade and started hunting monsters, but their forces were not built for battle since they were farmers instead. Slowly losing their lives at the hands of the monsters, they couldn't win a single fight. As a last resort, the Abundance faction started altering their basic skill harvest and turned it into Decapitate. Even then, they couldn't save the Abundance faction from collapse because Negation was just that powerful. Decapitate wasn't even a real combat skill. It was meant for emergency use in cutting off monsters' heads. It was merely modified to bring back the heads of dead animals or monsters. In the present, the goddess Ginseng was horrified, thinking that even though Abundance and warriors didn't mix, Decapitate was the best they could manage. If someone were insanely strong, even Decapitate would work like a charm, and maybe that monstrously strong guy was actually Chanso. As our boy turned around with his sight, the goddess imagined him as a serial killer who only thought of killing. Looking at him, the lady was shocked, but on the other hand, Chancellor just wanted to ask for some more apples. The goddess couldn't disagree with anything the boy said, knowing that it was dangerous for her. She wondered how a kid like this had ended up in the Abundance Zone. Just then, she had another naughty idea, thinking that no matter what, Chancellor was hers to claim now and no one could separate them. But as the goddess was looking at our boy, Chanso wondered what the goddess was doing and if she needed any help. The goddess, in her ginseng form, just hugged the boy's leg because that was all she could manage for now, deciding that she wouldn't hand Chanso over to anyone else no matter what. As she hugged him, Chanso thought that maybe the goddess was now going to absorb him instead. But that horror never came true. The scene shifts to evening time. The boy was holding a basket full of apples as he came near the altar where the goddess was already asleep. He knew she must have been really tired after growing a single giant tree all by herself with his help due to her low influence. Even the hamster had a long day, so Chanso thought maybe he should sleep too. As they were playing together cutely, suddenly thunder struck a distant area. The boy wondered what it was, feeling afraid. As he turned around, he saw that the goddess was still asleep but wondered why there were thunder noises all over the place. After not finding any source for some time, Chanso thought maybe he had been eating nothing but apples, and that the thunder was from his stomach instead, since apples alone wouldn't cut it. Suddenly, a system notification popped up, telling Chanso that a delivery event was now in progress. Now that the boy remembered the guidebook, he realized that delivery made sense because there were so many people coming to different worlds from Earth. But Chanso still wondered how they'd know where to deliver the goods without an address. The hamster yawned, clearly tired, and the boy decided they should sleep and think about it the next day. Chanso gathered multiple leaves and made a bed for the goddess and the cute hamster using fluffy-looking leaves. The scene shifts again to the next day, but this time to Earth. There was a huge building called the Shrine of Cycle. Inside the building, a woman walked fearlessly while multiple men were scared of her, wondering what was going on. Inside a cabin, another man was writing something in a notepad when the woman suddenly entered, making him blush and wonder what she was doing there instead of handling her delivery. The lady immediately asked her senior if he was messing with her. At first, the man didn't understand what she was talking about and tried to calm her down, but the lady projected a paper in her hand, telling him that she had already sworn, and now the paper didn't even make sense. We come to know that this lady was named Sujin, and she was screaming at her senior for sending her to an off-limits zone for a 3-day, 2-night business trip, even though the man knew Sujin wasn't getting paid for it. It was just a free shipping event, and the customer only wanted apples, no money at all, in exchange for more apples, which was a very strange request. Sujin wondered if the request was genuine and why her senior had given her this job if she hadn't done anything wrong. The man explained that Sujin had done quite the opposite. She was too passionate about work. He told her that while her dedication was admirable, overdoing it continuously would wear her body down. She should use this trip as an excuse to rest properly. The senior knew that if Sujin stayed in the office, she'd dive right back into work, so she should clear her head and enjoy the free trip. But Sujin wasn't buying his sweet talk, knowing full well that the manager was sending her because there was no one else available, disguising it as a holiday. The man didn't deny it but gave her a shoulder massage, telling her to go do the job because she might stumble upon a hidden realm. Sujin got more irritated, thinking there was no way she'd find a hidden realm when even professionals couldn't. Hidden realms were sealed blocks with special effects and extremely rare. But her senior didn't care, waving her off as she was sent on her trip, justifying that something good might come out of it. The lady agreed and disappeared from the scene. The scene then shifts to Sujin checking the list of orders, wondering why the order list was so wrong. Even though it was an off-limits zone, why did the person require so many items? She hoped it wouldn't turn out to be a wild goose chase, or she wouldn't let it slide for wasting her time. Back in the abundance block, we see that Chanso was playing hide-and-seek with the hamster. He immediately caught the hamster because its fur was showing. The hamster had been hiding behind a bag full of apples, eating some while making a lot of noise. Because of all those squeaks, Chanso easily found him and saw a half-eaten apple. Chanso acted like he didn't know the hamster's location, while the creature knew it had been found. Chanso grabbed the hamster with both hands as it squeaked in protest, upset that it lost the game. Chanso, both angry and amused, scolded it for gnawing on the apples because otherwise they wouldn't sell. The hamster's cheeks were being pulled as Chanso explained that the apples were meant for trading, and the delivery was coming soon, so it shouldn't ruin them. Meanwhile, the goddess just listened as Chanso spoke. He thought that since the delivery person was coming all the way to the desolated abundance zone, he couldn't make a bad first impression. From the delivery event information, Chanso had learned that the world he was in was divided into territories called blocks, which were true to their names. These block-type territories had grand summoning events always in progress. Even though they looked like normal land, their edges shimmered like walls that players couldn't pass through. To move between blocks, one needed a transfer ticket given once per day. However, since there was nothing nearby, he knew that 1 or 2 tickets wouldn't be enough. He had already tested them and found that the nearest village was almost a week away. It wasn't worth it. Chanso realized he was almost living on apples alone and found it crazy that the delivery only took 2 days, even when he had no clue what trick the delivery people used. Still, he didn't care as long as a sleeping bag arrived. A bed would be better, but he knew not to demand too much in his situation. He also wanted a cushion for the goddess, though she disagreed. Chanso thought he should keep raising the goddess's affection toward him, or he'd end up a mummy somewhere. Suddenly, he heard a rumbling noise and grabbed his sickle, realizing that monsters were approaching. He found it strange that the monsters he defeated seemed tied to the delivery. Since yesterday, they had been coming to him on their own without any reason. Chanso found them annoying, just as their name implied. They weren't undead, but more like revived soldiers. Either way, he had to deal with them because so many monsters near the safe house wasn't safe. The boy jumped with his weapon in hand, immediately using decapitate and slashing the heads of every monster he saw. One was left in the rear, trying to cast magic spells, but failed. The boy noticed it used solar energy and realized it was getting faster. He wondered if monsters could get stronger the same way skills did. Then he jumped toward the immortal mud demons, hacking and slashing through all of them as they advanced. He used decapitate again and again, cutting every head he could find. Even as more monsters appeared, their speed barely improved. Their viciousness remained, making him wonder why they were still so easy to kill. Meanwhile, all of this was being witnessed by none other than Sujin, who wondered who she was seeing. The lady, wearing flying boots, had entered the zone and thought both the boy and his hamster were monsters themselves, able to kill immortal demons so easily. She imagined them as vicious beings who enjoyed the killing. As Sujin flew closer to make the delivery, her small winged shoes kept her steady in the air. She watched with sharp, focused eyes as Chanso and his hamster effortlessly took down the immortal demons, both of them grinning with a playful, almost mischievous look. She couldn't help but think how strange it was. There was a time when the immortal demon had been a prized target for hunters. Defeating one earned far more points than ordinary monsters, drawing in adventurers looking for easy rewards. But the creature always revived. Each time it returned, it grew stronger, and anyone it chased would eventually be cursed and collapse. Over the years, people gave up on hunting it and began avoiding it altogether. While Chanso was busy defeating all the immortal demons, Sujin couldn't help feeling nervous. She wondered what kind of person he was to face a ghoul so boldly, without any fear of the consequences. As she watched him more closely, she noticed something strange. He didn't seem to be using any techniques to purify the curse. That made her think he might be a sword master. But then she grew confused. If he really was that skilled, why would someone like him waste time picking apples? The thought made her more cautious. She decided it would be best not to provoke him at all. Who knew what someone that powerful might do if offended? With that in mind, she carefully flew closer to him. After defeating the immortal demons, a glowing green panel suddenly appeared in front of Chanso, displaying the points he had earned. He mentally noted that his points were increasing by 5% each time. He had already gained a total of 10%, which made him think ahead. Since blessing apples cost 1,000 points each, his current resources would easily let him manage around 100 apples in a single day. Sitting on his shoulder, the hamster also grinned happily as the points rolled in. His eyes then turned toward a nearby temple, its spire shining faintly in the light. In that moment, he finally understood why the temple was built in such a remote place. The location itself was a goldmine for earning points. Just then, Sujin landed gracefully and gave a polite bow. She called out Chanso's name from behind, pulling him out of his thoughts. When he turned around, she announced that his delivery from the Circulation Trading Company had arrived. Sujin then greeted him with a warm smile and introduced herself, explaining that she was a representative from the company. Chanso was surprised and asked how she had managed to find him in such a remote place. As they shook hands, Sujin thought to herself that he had stood out far too much to miss. She reminded herself to stay cautious. After all, anyone who could toy with an immortal demon so easily was not someone she could afford to lower her guard around. As Sujin was lost in thought, something suddenly caught her eye, the tiny hamster sitting on Chanso's shoulder. It looked like a soft, marshmallow-like creature with shiny, round eyes, standing proudly at his side. The sight made her cheeks flush, and before she knew it, she was blushing and even drooling a little. She couldn't help but imagine how nice it would feel to touch and squeeze the adorable creature. Noticing her intense stare, the hamster quickly panicked and tried to hide behind Chanso's neck. Chanso noticed Sujin's dazed expression and asked, concerned, if she was feeling unwell. She quickly snapped out of it and insisted she was fine. Still, as she clutched her chest, her mind couldn't help but wander back to the tiny hamster, wishing she could touch it. Chanso, meanwhile, insisted that it was time to head off, but Sujin couldn't resist sneaking glances at the little creature, still longing to pinch it. They walked toward the apple tree, though Sujin was still distracted by the hamster. Suddenly, her attention shifted to the air, thick with the sweet scent of ripe apples. Chanso smiled with satisfaction and remarked that the apples had grown beautifully. Sujin was impressed by the size and fragrance of the massive tree, silently wondering if it could really be an apple tree at all. Seeing her, Chanso offered her one to taste. She eagerly accepted the apple, holding it in her hands with surprise. Not only was the tree huge, but the apples themselves were enormous. She wondered if such a big fruit might be bland inside, thinking it might look impressive but taste ordinary. The moment she bit into it, juice burst from the apple, and her expression instantly turned to astonishment. The flavor was far beyond what she expected, sweet, yet perfectly balanced with a pleasant acidity. Impressed, she quickly devoured the apple, mentally calculating its value. Each one could easily sell for 50,000, maybe even 100,000 gold. Before long, they found themselves in the middle of a negotiation. Sujin explained the current selling price, repeating that each apple went for 2,000 gold. When Chanso confirmed this, she immediately declared the price absurdly low. Chanso misunderstood at first, thinking he might have pushed the price too high, and noted that some shops did sell apples cheaper. He asked how much she thought they should charge. Sujin held up 2 fingers. Looking at her gesture, Chanso muttered that 200 seemed a little low. Sujin quickly interrupted, insisting that each apple should go for at least 20,000 gold. Hearing that, both Chanso and the hamster nearly freaked out, shouting, 20,000 gold! Sujin continued, explaining that if they supplied more to upscale department stores, the price could even exceed 30,000 gold per apple. Sujin stayed quiet, carefully weighing her options. She knew she could downplay the apples' value to make a quick profit, but she also realized the risk of deceiving someone who might become an important business partner. As she considered her choices, she reminded herself that she only had one life, and her mind couldn't help but replay the image of Chanso effortlessly battling the immortal demons. Sujin explained that these weren't just ordinary apples, they were the most delicious fruits she had ever tasted in her life. She believed they were even more valuable than any specialty product she had encountered. Reaching into her bag, she pulled out a formal, glowing contract and set the price at 20,000 gold per apple. Handing it to him, she asked him to sign. Chanso took the pen, studied the contract, and smiled. He made a few adjustments, and when Sujin saw the changes, she was surprised. Her share had increased. Chanso explained that he wanted to maintain a long-term partnership with her and genuinely appreciated her honesty about the apple's true value. Both of them shook hands, sealing the agreement. Sujin handed over the goods Chanso had ordered: seeds, food, cooking utensils, and as a special gift from Circulation Trading, 2 desert demon fangs. She also pulled 2 eggs from her bag. Playfully, she suggested that Chanso could take the hamster as his familiar, thinking he might not need it, while secretly admiring how cute the little creature was. Chanso looked confused, explaining that he didn't have a familiar. Sujin noted that the hamster seemed too friendly to be just a monster, and apologized if she had misunderstood. Chanso clarified that the hamster was not a familiar and asked her to explain further. Sujin proceeded to explain that the strength of a familiar depends on how many points are infused into its egg with blessings. She warned that overdoing it could break the egg, and that once it starts trembling intensely, it's best to stop. Chanso considered her advice, acknowledging that he would have to get a feel for it himself through practice. As they discussed schedules, Chanso mentioned that he was currently harvesting around 50 apples a day and planned to expand his crops even further in the future. Sujin was surprised by the volume and decided they would adjust the supply cycle to match. She even planned for a dedicated warehouse to handle the stock. After ironing out all the details, their first transaction was successfully completed. After the meeting with Sujin, Chanso went to check on the queen, still in the form of a radish, whom he had hidden before the hunt. He noted that she must have had a hard time staying hidden all this while. He also reflected on Sujin, thinking that she seemed kind and competent, but reminded himself that it was always safer to remain cautious. His attention returned to the contract and the amount of gold he had earned. Selling just a few apples had made him wealthier than he had ever imagined. Silently, he gave thanks to the goddess for this unexpected blessing. Meanwhile, the queen noticed the familiar eggs and clung to them, intrigued. Chanso, however, knew that to strengthen the eggs, he would need more points, which meant finding more regular customers. He reflected that the only monster he had fought so far was the immortal demon, yet things were going far better than he had expected. Thinking back on everything that had happened since he arrived, he felt no fear. On the contrary, he was genuinely excited for what lay ahead. The scene shifted to the office of the Circulation Trading Company, where Sujin sat with her boss, one of the apples she had brought spread out in slices on the table. They discussed Chanso, speculating whether he might be an apostle, a follower, or someone involved in alchemy. Sujin clarified that he was Korean and that his influence seemed tied to war or violence, or perhaps he was unaffiliated. Her boss nodded, pointing out that all apostles were Korean, so it wasn't unusual. He remarked that someone like Chanso, who could raise creatures in a combat faction, made sense. Sujin, trembling, added that with nothing but a rusty sickle, he had cut down hundreds of immortal demons, always aiming for their heads. Her boss, eating the apple slices one by one, suggested that Chanso might be training with handicaps to become a sword master, and advised her to focus on concealing him rather than guarding him. Sujin agreed, but as her boss reached for the last slice of apple, she grabbed his hand, interrupting him mid-discussion about selling apples to department stores. They ended up playfully fighting over the final piece. The scene then returned to Chanso, who was using his points to bless the eggs. He wondered aloud what kind of familiar he would get, referring to it as a child. As the egg began to glow intensely, cracks spread across its surface, drawing both their attention. Chanso speculated whether the creature inside would be cute or hardworking. Leaning closer, they watched as the shell split with a sharp crack and a beam of light burst forth from within. It was an SSS rank familiar, Patient. From the broken shell, a chick emerged. It was unusually large for its kind, fluffy, and bright-eyed, but still clearly just a chick. Chanso stared at it in disbelief. He couldn't help but replay the fact that he had spent 120,000 points on this egg. For that price, he had expected something majestic, a divine beast, a fierce guardian, maybe even a legendary creature. Instead, he was staring at what looked like a regular baby chicken. Meanwhile, the chick wandered around and began bowing toward the goddess, completely unaware of his disappointment. Disappointment washed over him. He had hoped for a reliable companion that could support him in his future plans. Instead, all he saw was potential poultry. A dry thought crossed his mind that if nothing else, he could always raise it and eat it later. It had been ages since he'd last tasted chicken. Even so, the feeling of letdown lingered. After spending 120,000 points, ending up with just a chick felt like a cruel joke. Despite his doubts, he decided to give the chick a name, though he reminded himself not to get too attached. Sitting down, he introduced himself to it and chose the name Ari. Before long, the chick pointed toward another egg that had started to crack. Chanso turned to it with a spark of hope, a small smile forming as he silently wished that this time, a hardworking familiar might emerge. When the shell finally broke, however, a tiny piglet appeared, sitting calmly and letting out a cheerful oink. Chanso's expression shifted between disbelief and resignation. Without much thought, he quickly named the piglet Doji. Frustration started to build inside him. He couldn't understand why his servant beasts kept hatching as potential food ingredients rather than useful companions. What was supposed to be the exciting promise of getting powerful familiars was beginning to feel more like a scam. Then something completely unexpected happened. Both the chick and the piglet lowered themselves respectfully, bowing before the goddess. They introduced themselves to the goddess of abundance as her 10th and 12th vassals, the chick still wearing bits of eggshell on its hips, and the piglet with a piece stuck to its forehead. The goddess sat on a rock before them, her expression heavy with sorrow. She admitted that it had been a long time and asked for their forgiveness, expressing regret that she hadn't been able to protect them until the very end. The chick quickly stepped forward to comfort her, insisting that it was they who had failed in their duties, not her. The piglet, eyes brimming with tears, declared its determination to help restore the goddess to her true, beautiful form. The goddess expressed her gratitude, but immediately issued a warning. She explained that they needed to be careful around her apostle, O Chanso. He did not yet know their identities as her vassals, and if he deemed them useless, he might sell them, or even eat them. Hearing this, both the chick and the piglet shuddered, imagining Chanso with a menacing look, pondering what to do with them. The goddess then advised them to behave and look presentable for him until he learned how to communicate with them. The piglet trembled, nervously wondering if the goddess's warning could really be true. The chick, however, stayed more optimistic, sighing as it reasoned that their apostle seemed fairly clueless. Together, they decided to keep a close eye on him for the time being. The next morning began like any other on the farm. Chanso stretched and got ready for his routine, greeting the immortal demons as he went. One by one, he sliced their heads, playfully wishing them good morning and calling them his dear customers as he continued his work. The sharp slicing sounds cut through the air, unexpectedly waking the chick and the piglet. The sleepy chick asked what all the noise was so early in the morning, while the piglet, still half asleep, mimicked the sound. As they opened their eyes, both of them freaked out when they realized that the terrifying noise wasn't some monster or disaster. It was just Chanso slicing the immortal demon heads. When Ari realized that the skill Chanso had used was called decapitate, her feathers practically stood on end. Doji swallowed hard, his eyes watery and full of fear. As Chanso sliced off the head of one of the demons, it landed near them. Seeing it, both of them started trembling. Ari recalled how Chanso had looked at them the day before, almost as if he were licking his lips, and shared her thoughts with Doji. Doji hesitated, unsure if he believed it, but Ari was convinced. She imagined Chanso laughing, drooling, and thinking about eating chicken for the first time in a long while. The thought made her panic even more, thinking he really might eat them. Later, after a successful hunt against the immortal demons, confirmed by a green panel, Chanso settled back into his daily routine. Suddenly, he noticed Ari and Doji beneath him and asked when they had arrived. The vassals greeted their apostle with exaggerated enthusiasm, showering him with praise and greetings in their own language, even though he couldn't understand them. Ari stood on Doji's back, holding a towel for him. Chanso smiled and sat on one knee to reach for the towel. Seeing his smile, Doji froze in fear once again. Chanso thanked them warmly, calling their gesture thoughtful, and then used the towel to wipe himself. The scene shifted to Chanso handing out food generously. The piglet accepted it eagerly, unable to hide its excitement. Ari, watching silently, scolded the piglet in her mind, reminding it to maintain appearances instead of acting greedy. Chanso, clearly amused, praised the piglet's healthy appetite and encouraged it to eat as much as it wanted and grow big. As he watched Doji eat, a mischievous idea crossed Chanso's mind. He wondered if feeding the pig eating fruit might make the pork tastier, smiling at the thought of grape-fed pork becoming a delicacy. Ari overheard him and scolded the piglet, warning that it would turn into apple-scented pork belly. Chanso then turned to Ari and offered her a plate of apple slices. The delicious aroma made Ari drool, and she immediately thought that Chanso must have spent at least 500 points on the apples, a sum that a normal apostle could earn in an entire day. Nervously, she hesitated, determined not to fall into a trap. Chanso noticed with interest that Ari might not like apples and seemed far pickier than Doji. Thinking quickly, he put out a bowl of grains instead. Ari's eyes lit up at the sight, and she began to drool, thought that she wasn't like Doji and wouldn't get turned into fried chicken. Still, she couldn't resist her hunger and quickly started eating the grains. Life on the farm settled into a steady routine. Under Chanso's direction, Doji plowed the soil while Ari planted black beans. The earth was tilled, watered, and then blessed with the goddess's power. The process was so quick and efficient that Chanso turned it into a short 3-minute farming lesson, showing how simple everything had become with divine blessings. Silently, he acknowledged that the goddess's aid made the work far easier than it should have been. When the first harvest arrived, Chanso noticed Ari staring at the black, shiny beans, clearly drawn to them. He wondered if chicks were naturally attracted to shiny objects while reminding himself that they weren't crows. Before giving the beans to Ari, he remembered that the first harvest was always reserved for the goddess. The goddess eagerly jumped forward, holding the bowl filled with beans in both hands and absorbing them instantly. Chanso still hadn't grown accustomed to the way the goddess consumed offerings. It struck him as very strange. Later, as Chanso handed out the beans for everyone to eat, he mentioned that they would be planting potatoes and sweet potatoes next. Doji responded with eager delight, happily munching on the beans and admiring how tasty they were. Chanso recalled the previous meal, noting that Doji always ate well, but Ari wasn't much of a light eater. The hamster on Chanso's shoulder gestured for him to look at Ari, and eventually she gave in to her hunger as well, devouring the beans. After finishing their meal, both Doji and Ari lay down, burping contentedly. Ari, however, couldn't shake the thought that she might be doomed. Chanso, with the hamster perched on his shoulder and giving a thumbs up, was genuinely pleased to see them eating so well. He resolved to grow even more varieties of crops for them in the future. Suddenly, he remembered that the apples were scheduled to go on sale that day, and began wondering how the sales were going. Meanwhile, at the department store, preparations were nearly complete. The display was ready, with only the apples left to be placed. Sujin's boss stood back, observing the crowd, noting that no one had made the first move yet. The packaging was elaborate and luxurious, proudly displaying the bold name Emperor Apple with gold dust sprinkled over it and winter bird feathers for decoration. Each apple was priced at 200,000 G, which seemed to intimidate potential buyers. Free samples weren't allowed, leaving Sujin's boss anxious about how to attract customers. Meanwhile, the people in the crowd whispered among themselves, wondering why an apple could possibly cost so much. Unexpectedly, the staff began thanking someone for a purchase. Sujin's boss leaned forward, trying to see what had happened, while his junior pointed out the stock. They were all gone. Confused, the boss asked how that was possible, since there had been stock just a moment ago. The junior explained that a single customer had tried one apple and ended up buying the entire inventory. One of the staff added that the recipient had signed the name Rohan. The crowd erupted in shock and excitement as they processed the enormous sale. People quickly realized that Rohan had just bought out the entire stock and began murmuring excitedly among themselves. Suddenly, the boss recognized him. It was Rohan, the legendary sword master, pioneer of handicap training, and a figure admired across the land. Rohan walked away with a bag full of apples slung over his shoulder, happily munching on one and admiring how tasty it was. People gathered in disbelief, whispering and guessing what it all meant. News spread quickly through the district. Sujin's boss thought Rohan buying all their apples would just create a small buzz, but soon a breaking news report announced that the sword master's training food had been revealed. Apples, the daily staple of Rohan's legendary regimen, were now on the market. Online, people began speculating whether eating apples could make them sword masters too. When Sujin's boss saw the article, he panicked, wondering what kind of headline that was and how anyone had thought it was a good idea to publish it. Merchants all around were already scrambling to respond. In his office, Sujin's boss Ryu Wan's phone started ringing non-stop. People kept asking if apples could really make someone a sword master. Frustrated, he shouted that of course they couldn't and that the assumption was ridiculous. More calls followed, each filled with similar nonsense. Meanwhile, a huge surprise order of 100 boxes of apples. Ryu Wan yelled that it wasn't that simple, but by then it was too late. The apple craze had officially begun. Meanwhile, far from all the chaos in another world, a week had already passed since Chanso's arrival. Life there was peaceful and plentiful. Hamdal, Ari, Doji, and the goddess were enjoying black beans harvested from the farm, while Chanso, wearing an apron, said that now that their meal was ready, it was time for him to prepare his own food too. The table was neatly arranged with utensils and fresh vegetables. Picking up a potato and a sweet potato, Chanso remarked that they were just as delicious as the apples. He began peeling the potatoes and chopping the vegetables, carefully preparing all the ingredients. As he started cooking in the pan, his skill became clear in the way he handled the food and controlled the flame with ease. Hamdal the goddess and his familiars watched in admiration, clearly impressed by his talent. Doji, the piglet, stared at him with shiny eyes, drooling as the delicious smell filled the air. He muttered that the food wasn't for them and reminded them that they had just eaten, but everyone ignored him completely. Doji kept pleading with wide, sparkling eyes, refusing to back down. With a sigh, he finally gave in and offered Doji a bite. The piglet eagerly ate it straight from his hand. Just then, Hei Sujin arrived. She greeted Chanso, and he was genuinely happy to see her. Her eyes lit up with excitement when she noticed his familiars. She exclaimed that he had successfully hatched all of them, an achievement that made the scene 3 times cuter in her eyes. Meanwhile, the 3 familiars immediately surrounded the goddess, determined to shield her from the outsider and protect her no matter what. Chanso, however, didn't seem too worried about appearances and stayed calm amid the commotion. He kept his guard up as he acknowledged Sujin's comment about all the familiars hatching and asked what had brought her there. Sujin, wearing a cheerful grin and clearly excited, said she had some good news and asked if he wanted to hear it. Chanso crossed his arms and listened carefully, wary but attentive. Sujin then showed him the receipts, explaining that the apples had sold out for 2 days in a row, with the price soaring to 200,000 gold each. Chanso was stunned, holding his head in disbelief as he repeated the price aloud, amazed that it had happened for 2 consecutive days. Sujin just waved it off, telling him not to mention it and explaining that the chaos was because people simply couldn't get enough. He began calculating in his head. The apples weren't even considered expensive, priced around 900 gold. Were there really that many rich people? Then he considered his cut, about 30%, which meant 60,000 gold per apple for him. If he sold 50 a day, that would be around 3 million gold daily, translating to an annual revenue of roughly 1 billion gold. His imagination ran wild. He pictured himself wearing a gold chain, throwing money around and laughing, with Hamdal on his shoulder, his familiar piglet chewing on cash, and even the goddess adorned in jewelry. The thought made his face flush and his mouth water. He even imagined that if his plan worked, it might help him uncover clues about his parents. Clenching his fist at the thought of his past self, he refocused. Turning to Sujin, he said that department store fees were quite expensive, but since she had provided him with a hit product, he would negotiate as much as possible to lower them. Then he asked how long she thought the craze around the Emperor apples would last. He admitted he didn't want to ruin his fantasy, but expecting them to keep selling at 200,000 gold indefinitely seemed unrealistic. Sujin, however, reasoned that with 1 million potential customers, even selling just 100 apples a day could sustain the business for 27 years, and that over time, loyal customers would develop as well. Chanso asked again, worried if she wasn't expecting too many customers. Sujin reassured him, saying he didn't need to worry. Even if the numbers seemed huge by Earth standards, the market there was on the scale of China. Meanwhile, his familiars quietly kept the goddess hidden from Sujin. Then Sujin, holding one of Chanso's hands, suggested that he consider increasing apple production. Chanso proposed trying other crops first, claiming they were just as delicious as the apples. Sujin was shocked. Something could really be as delicious as the apples. In her surprise, she gripped his hand too tightly, cutting off circulation. That very evening, Chanso hosted a tasting session. He apologized for the wait and presented simple yet nostalgic dishes, starting with boiled potatoes. Sujin tasted them, blushing with sparkling eyes, and commented on their sweetness, the fantastic sweet and salty combination from the sprinkled salt, the nutty fragrance of the skin, and the perfectly fluffy texture. Chanso was thrilled by her reaction. He then brought out pancakes, fries, and roasted sweet potatoes, all of which he had prepared himself. The reaction was overwhelming. Sujin praised the dishes, saying they tasted good enough to be served in high-end restaurants and that the potato fries could even be considered a main dish rather than just a side dish. Chanso smiled, glad that they suited her taste, and announced that the final dish was roasted sweet potato, the one Doji went crazy for. Amid the laughter, the familiars went wild over the roasted sweet potatoes. Doji rolled around and squealed with pure joy, his excited oink-oink echoing as he demanded a share. Ari, meanwhile, looked thin and sulky. Chanso glanced at her and asked why she looked so skinny, revealing the culprit saying Doji had stolen her portion. Meanwhile, Hamdal spotted the sweet potato in Sujin's hand and jumped up to lick it. Sujin blushed, thinking how cute and fluffy he was. Eventually, the conversation shifted back to business. Chanso considered selling these crops alongside the apples, but Sujin thanked him for the meal and reminded him that apple production had to take priority to meet the soaring demand. Chanso, worried, said it would be difficult without gaining more points, thinking he couldn't spend all his resources on growing crops. Sujin reassured him, expressing appreciation for his effort and asking him to focus on the apples instead of other crops. She explained that, as he knew, all the apostles were Korean, and the world's culture was heavily influenced by that. They were truly surprised by such delicious food, and even if other crops were in demand, they wouldn't fetch high prices or be as profitable as the apples. She emphasized that the demand for apples would continue to grow, while the gently squashed Hamdal between her hands stood there, as she begged him to consider her position. Sujin bowed to him, thinking about how, despite the high department store commissions and all the effort he had put into harvesting, he had even treated her to a meal. She worried about pushing him too hard. Then Chanso said that he could manage 100 apples a day. Surprised, Sujin asked if he was serious. That was when a deal was struck. Chanso would supply 100 apples per day. He thought there was no need to cling to the high road, but it was still worth trying. Still holding Hamdal in her hand, Sujin thanked him sincerely. The next morning, Chanso looked out over his farm with quiet satisfaction, followed closely by Ari and Doji. As they walked, Doji wondered aloud if it was right to keep following him all the time, especially since they couldn't really do anything. Ari scolded him, telling him to stop talking nonsense, and added that if they didn't watch over Chanso, who would? She insisted they couldn't let the dim-witted hamster handle it alone. His familiars trailed behind him in a noisy procession, still bickering. Chanso wondered why they kept following him everywhere and whether they could actually be combat types. Looking at them, he thought there was no way familiars were just freeloaders who only ate. Then, without warning, a guttural roar shattered the peaceful morning. An immortal demon lunged after Ari and Doji. Chanso patted his head in frustration, muttering that he hated himself for expecting anything and that it was lucky the immortal demon was too slow. As the demon nearly reached Doji, the piglet panicked and cried. Chanso shouted, asking what it was doing and telling it to move. Even knowing he was too far to save Doji directly, he grabbed his weapon and swung. The next moment, as Ari opened her eyes through tears and fear, she realized Chanso's attack had struck. Doji, though terrified, was still alive, trembling but unharmed. A sudden realization struck Chanso that his skill's range had increased. He knew for certain that his sickle shouldn't have reached the demon from that distance. As the other demons drew closer, he began to wonder if his skill had been upgraded. He narrowed his eyes and adjusted his stance. Taking a deep breath, he activated decapitation. The blade sliced through the air faster than ever, effortlessly defeating multiple demons at once. As he analyzed the angle, positioning, and speed of his scythe, a green panel appeared before him, indicating that mass decapitation had been activated and that the range of decapitation had expanded. Thinking about the name mass decapitation, Chanso wondered what kind of name it was, then smiled, nodding that the range had widened. Turning to face the demons approaching from behind, he realized he could now attract more regular monsters. In a single sweeping motion, 4 or 5 monsters dropped at once. He continued swinging, defeating tens of demons in moments. Watching him, Ari and Doji clung to each other in fear and ran to the goddess, shouting that something terrible had happened. The goddess asked them what was wrong and why they were rushing back so frantically. Ari reported that the apostle had begun cutting off 4 to 5 heads at once. She added that while it was certainly impressive that he was growing stronger, perhaps it would have been wiser to prioritize his communication skill. The news left the goddess startled and uneasy. She told Ari to calm down, reminding her that she had never granted him such a skill. Still frightened, Ari admitted that she couldn't even eat properly. Doji, in contrast, explained calmly that the skill was called mass decapitation and asked if it had been granted by the goddess. Hearing the name, even the goddess felt a shiver of fear. The goddess was nervous as she told Doji and Ari that she had never heard or seen such a skill. The goddess wondered if Chainsaw was really a human, or maybe a god of death from hell or something. But just then, her brain jolted, and she kind of guessed what might have happened. Hearing that, Doji straight up claimed that it was the goddess who had granted this skill to Chanso. Hearing that, Ari kicked the pig away, calling him an idiot and telling him to stay still and just listen. After that, we see that the pig was down, and Ari told the goddess to continue. It was explained that the apostle's skill was growing, because decapitation was a skill made by modifying the harvest skill. It was already known that the harvest skill grew with the user, and area harvest became possible, resulting in multiple crops being cut, which meant that similarly, maybe the decapitation skill had also evolved into a mass decapitation skill. Hearing that, both Ari and Doji were horrified because it was only possible for first-year apostles, and even then they couldn't do it. But Chanso was able to do it in just a few days, and that's why the goddess knew that Chanso was a scary child. But still, he was also a grateful one. Hearing that, everyone was captivated by the goddess's grace. She explained with a smile that even though Chanso seemed scary because of his monster-like growth rate, thanks to him, they were able to talk like this, and everyone was reborn and revitalized. The goddess promised Ari that as soon as the apostle returned, she would grant him the communication skill so that the chick would not worry too much. Even Ari apologized to the goddess for showing an ugly side to her. But just then, the goddess noticed that Chanso was coming back, waving his hands. The goddess was happy but didn't know what she should say first, though she wanted to have a conversation with her apostle soon. She wondered if she should first introduce the familiars as her divine beasts. Suddenly, as all three of them grabbed our boy, he got a notification that the god of abundance was granting Chanso a new skill. She knew that limiting the apostle's path was against the world's rules. They had to decide for themselves. So the goddess gave him two options for choosing a skill: promise of abundance and communication. Thinking that, of course, if Chanso was her apostle, he would choose communication, she planned that she would tell him to stay away from fights since they were dangerous. First of all, she would thank him for choosing her when she had such low influence. We see that the boy chose the skill, and as the selection ended based on his choice, he acquired the promise of abundance. Hearing that, the goddess was still smiling, not able to process it, and then her face turned pale. We come to a flashback once again at the start of the incident. We see that Chanso was thinking about what to choose. He had no idea what the promise of abundance did, but the communication skill would let him talk to animals and plants. But then he thought that if he chose that, Ari would surely feel betrayed and ask him in agony how he could break the chick's trust. For Doji, it was the same. The pig would promise revenge, along with the giant tree who was nagging Chanso. The tree had been bearing apples over 100 times a day, and now his shoulders were really falling off. The boy was terrified, thinking that this would not do. By just imagining it, and since there was also a saying that ignorance is bliss, he decided to never choose communication at all. While the goddess was looking at her apostle with glinting eyes, he chose the promise of abundance. And now all three creatures were crying, knowing that they would never communicate again, while Chanso wondered why everyone suddenly became gloomy. He decided to focus on the skill for now. Now he had decapitation along with promise of abundance. As there was no explanation, Chanso knew that the system was flawed and started thinking about what a promise with the goddess of abundance could be. He immediately took a giant apple and promised that he would offer the apples to the goddess. Then, as Chanso gave it to the goddess, she immediately backed away, turning around and making a pouty face. But as the boy sulked, we see that he got some more seeds for the apples, as the system told him that points used according to the skill would be summed up and returned. Chanso came to know that he just had to keep his promise, and even when the goddess did not eat it, he would still get the points back because his end of the promise was complete. It felt like quests that were given to him. He even made a promise that he would pinch Hamdal's cheek, and as it happened, the points went in once again. As the hamster was punching the boy's face, Chanso wondered if he should try one more time. Chanso promised that he would make Doji's belly, and hearing that, Ari was shocked, wondering what was going to happen to his friend. But then Chanso completed his sentence, that he would make it full, and he started giving apples to the pig, who was eating all of them with a nice grin. But as the points were not coming back, Chanso wondered if it was a bug and the system was not recording it. Then he realized that the little pig's belly was not full yet, even when the boy had given him over 10 apples to eat. The feeding was getting more expensive than the return, and our boy thought that he should stop, even if the principal was a bit wasted. But suddenly, someone came running toward Chanso, and we see that it was none other than Sujin herself, panting after running so much. Chanso wondered why the lady was back in just one day and if something was wrong. Sujin told Chanso that there was no time for questions and that he needed to quickly conquer and defend the block. Chanso was a bit skeptical, wondering if someone was going to attack, and Sujin agreed, telling him that they might, because the Emperor Apple's popularity had soared so much that they had limited purchases to one per person. But still, 5,000 people had already made reservations. Chanso's eyes bulged out as he heard this number along with Hamdal, who couldn't believe it. Sujin explained that people didn't care when they received it. They wanted the departmental store to send them as soon as they came in. Because of that, there might be raiders targeting the apples and the blocks, swarming toward Chanso's place. Since the area was an outside territory, there was no way to prevent crime there. It would have been different if there was proper backing, but things were not so simple. Hearing that, Chanso turned around, realizing that his only backup was the goddess of abundance, and if he lost, he would lose not only the goddess but the whole abundance itself. Sujin suggested that Chanso at least needed to conquer the blocks and install gates. The boy realized it, explaining that they should conquer surrounding blocks to create camouflage bases. That way, the distance to Sujin would also get closer, so she could protect them too. Even the girl realized that it was a good idea, knowing that if they conquered blocks and made gates, then movement ticket restrictions would also disappear. But Chanso still wondered why there were so many reservations piling up. This was not a normal situation at all. Sujin was surprised that Chanso didn't know, and she explained that the whole block was in chaos because of the Emperor Apple's effects. Chanso wondered what the effects were, and the lady explained that there were rumors that eating Emperor Apples made skill proficiency increase faster, cured diseases, prevented illness, cleared skin, eliminated fatigue, whitened teeth, helped lose weight, and improved memory. That was the rumor. Chanso was screaming inside and outside, wondering if Sujin was kidding. Because if that was true, they should just call the apple a mythical fruit named Panacea. Even Sujin pouted in disappointment, knowing that it was confirmed to be untrue. Even though she had some hope, it was still disappointing. But on the other hand, the boy wondered how this could even be possible. He decided to quickly conquer the blocks first and think later. But Sujin kept asking Chanso if this was really true with desperate eyes. Even when the boy got nervous, he denied it, telling her that these were just apples and nothing else. As the scene shifts, we come to the city hospital in the real world, where we see Rohan going inside and someone was following him. We see that he was some kind of photographer, thinking that he must have hit a jackpot today. Inside the room, a really handsome man was lying down with a tablet. His name was Hong, a grand alchemist, wondering how much longer Rohan was going to take. Rohan immediately put the hospital gift on the side table and said nothing. But Hong was shocked because that day was his discharge anyway. Opening the gift, Hong wondered if this was the same fabled apple. Rohan was not able to believe that the alchemist knew about it, but Hong explained that this was the apple Rohan had brought a bunch of after discovering something mysterious. Hearing that, Rohan realized the rumor had already spread everywhere. He straight up denied everything, telling Hong that it was all nonsense. The alchemist knew that his friend would say that, but as the man took one bite of the apple, he immediately felt the heavenly aroma of the fruit, telling Rohan that it was crazy. It felt like every taste and nutrition were packed to the limit inside the apple. Hong wondered if the other apples were this delicious too, and what the taste variations were. But we see that Rohan was eating the apples, and with a full mouth, he wondered if he was some god of cooking that he was being asked such questions. Hong realized that even with Rohan's senses, it was hard to know how people could have grown this. Even using special fertilizer, it wasn't possible to enhance both the taste and aroma of all the apples. As the boy noticed Rohan eating all the apples one by one, he screamed at his friend, asking why he was eating the apples from the gift, and why he had brought them if he wanted to eat them himself. But Rohan calmly answered that if Hong wanted the apple so badly, then he should eat quickly. Hong was now really annoyed, telling Rohan that he did not lack time or money, and that he would buy it with his own money instead. But when he called the representative, he was told that reservations were currently backed up. Even when Hong was ready to pay double or triple the price, trying to convince the representative, he was denied and the call was cut. Meanwhile, Rohan just made a smug face, knowing what had happened. He told Hong that he also had both money and time, and most importantly, he knew the place. Hong saw that Rohan had completely eaten the apples and threw a pillow toward him, wondering if he was even a true friend for doing this, while Rohan just told him that it was his fault for not eating fast enough. Meanwhile, the photographer clicked a picture and circulated it. The next day, the rumor spread that the grand alchemist Hong was discharged immediately after eating the Emperor Apple. It became the headline, "The Emperor Apple that even cured the alchemist's side effects, truly a panacea." Meanwhile, we see that the owner of the departmental store was reading the newspaper, knowing that as he was already busy to death because of the false rumors, another one had now appeared in front of them. He wondered if someone was playing a prank on them, because these rumors were adding fuel to the fire, making the Emperor Apple the panacea when it was not. As the scene shifts, we come inside the abundance domain, where Chanso told the goddess that since he needed to go and claim the surrounding blocks, he was leaving tonight. Hearing that, the goddess immediately threw the potato she was holding. As the boy was telling Doji and Ari to protect the goddess, she turned pale, thinking that Chanso was leaving just because of a new skill that wasn't even a combat skill. The goddess knew she had to do something, so she started slamming her boy's shoes, trying to tell him not to go because it was dangerous. But on the other hand, Chanso wondered why the goddess was acting like that. Suddenly, something struck his mind as he wondered if it was finally time for something. The hamster was looking at the boiled potato while Chanso realized that the potatoes and apples were all just carbs, and the seeds were actually plant-based proteins. Now it was time for some real protein because what he had wasn't enough. Chanso looked at Ari and Doji, thinking he never had the nerve to eat meat in front of these cute creatures, but he had some beef, which was pretty fine as a source of protein. Chanso smiled, turning towards the storage room, telling Ari and Doji that they would have to understand because the goddess wanted it. He went to the storage racks and started searching. Finally, his whole face started glittering as he found the premium beef he had ordered before. Since Chanso had never seen real meat before, everything was exciting for the boy. He wondered if this was what real meat looked like because on Earth, they only had lab-grown meat, and even that he had only ever seen in pictures. Just like in those pictures, his mouth watered even before tasting it. He immediately turned on the griller and started searing the meat. As Chanso cooked, he had a beautiful smile on his face, and the hamster drooled at the smell. Chanso knew that just the aroma of natural meat was far better than lab-grown meat. Even Doji came running towards Chanso, wondering what was being cooked that smelled so delicious. But Chanso immediately denied the pig, telling him that it was for the goddess. Seeing that, Ari turned towards the goddess, insulting Doji and telling him that even after eating his share of food, he was at it again. But when Ari saw the goddess, she became scared because the goddess now had a deadly expression. The chick wondered if the food wasn't enough and ran toward Chanso, trying to tell him that the goddess was still hungry and that he should check. Chanso told the chick that the food was almost ready and would take just a few more seconds. He immediately picked up the freshly cooked meat and gave it to the goddess, telling her to be careful because it was hot. But the goddess was frustrated that Chanso wasn't listening to what she wanted to say. She slammed the meat down while trying to tell him not to go somewhere dangerous. On the other hand, Chanso wondered if the meat was bad or if there was some other reason she was mad. But the meat couldn't taste bad since he had just bought it. Even when he tasted it, it was really good, yet something felt off. As he realized what was missing, Chanso felt sad because the meat didn't have the same punch as the apple. He thought maybe that was why the goddess didn't eat it and was angry with him. We see the goddess crying while Chanso had a heart attack thinking she must have disliked the taste. But all the goddess wanted was for Chanso not to go somewhere dangerous. Then Chanso knelt down and smiled at the goddess, telling her that he was definitely going to find her some truly delicious meat and that she should just wait a little longer. Hearing that, both the pig and the chick were scared, wondering if their time had come. As the scene shifts to night, it was midnight. Both Doji and Ari were sleeping, dreaming about something horrifying, while the goddess was still awake as the hamster snored. The goddess sat sadly, looking at the piece of meat she had thrown away. The scene shifts again, Chanso was nearly at the edge of the block, looking at the forest and a thin line that protected it, realizing that this was the border of the block. It was nighttime, and everything shimmered under the moonlight. Even though it looked endless from afar, the space itself was rippling, and the border was quite visible up close. As Chanso touched the border, a system notification popped up, asking if he wanted to travel to Block 35N, 10E finally. Chanso decided he should go, and the system started loading everything according to the new block, even giving a tip that movement tickets reset daily at midnight. Chanso was shocked, realizing that the system even gave him tips when crossing blocks. But as soon as he crossed the border, the lantern broke and the boy panicked, wondering what had happened to it. He quickly fixed it again and looked around, realizing the area was filled with giant trees, as if he had entered a literal forest, or rather, a jungle. Chanso knew this place was completely different from his domain. As he started moving, he saw some flying creatures and was shocked. Looking closer, he realized they were swarms of small flies attracted to the lantern light. But up close, he noticed they had sharp fangs and crimson eyes, ready to devour anyone in their way. They were too large to be mosquitoes and definitely not to be taken lightly. He ran as fast as he could, taking out his scythe, wondering why there were so many bugs. Since they were too small, Chanso realized he couldn't even use decapitate or mass decapitate on them. He had no chance of fighting, so he immediately turned back, knowing it was the only option. But as he was about to touch the border of his zone, he saw multiple immortal demons coming out of it. Chanso wondered why they were inside another block. At first, he thought maybe they had come to protect him, imagining that perhaps the immortal demons believed only they were allowed to defeat him and would fight anyone else who tried. However, Chanso dodged every one of them and ran away, realizing his imagination was surely wild and too optimistic. But as he turned around, he saw the immortal demons actually fighting the bugs. The bugs were swarming only onto the demons due to territorial invasion. Chanso stopped, realizing this was his chance, and immediately used asterisk mass decapitate on all the remaining immortal demons, knowing it was time to fall back. Even when the demons tried to catch him, he touched the barrier and wished to the goddess to return. To his success, Chanso was back in the zone of abundance, knowing it had been too close. A second's delay could have cost him his life. Suddenly, a tip popped up that changed everything. It said that defeating evolved monsters grants bonus points. Chanso wondered if his hypothesis was true, that he would get bonus points for the monsters killed after defeating these bug monsters. If so, this was a total point jackpot. He knew this changed everything, and since his regulars were also leveling up, he couldn't even be mad. He was gaining insane amounts of points and bonuses for defeating them. The boy was happy with his trusty weapon in hand. The scene shifts to reality, where the store manager was furious because complaint calls had been driving him crazy. Even Sujin was terrified, wondering when the issue would be resolved. The Emperor Apple rumors were getting out of control. Even though it was good marketing, they couldn't let the rumors spread further. The departmental head immediately told Sujin that now no one would say a word about the Emperor Apple. No interviews, no answering questions, nothing. Every question about the apple would be met with total silence. Sujin wondered if they could even do that since it would cause total chaos afterward. But the store head said firmly that they wouldn't say a word, even with a knife to their throat. While he explained that reporters needed to learn their lesson, Sujin noticed someone behind him and turned pale, trying to stop the store head from talking. She asked if he was really serious about keeping silent even if someone literally put a knife to his throat. The departmental head was shocked by Sujin's behavior, thinking she was being childish and asking what kind of stupid question that was. But then he realized someone really was behind him and wanted to tell him he was wrong. Then the man behind spoke, asking for forgiveness for startling the store head, saying it was merely a greeting. It was Rohan, who had personally come to the department store himself. Seeing him, both of them were terrified because Rohan was a sword master. The store head wondered if it really was a greeting and not a threat, and how he had gotten inside the office without anyone noticing. The man immediately asked Rohan what business he had with them, slamming his hands on the table and saying that even when he spoke to their president, the president had been tight-lipped. So now he hoped the store head would not be the same. He demanded to know who the Emperor Apple grower actually was and where he resided. The store head was actually terrified, his face completely pale. He immediately ran towards Sujin and grabbed her by the shoulders, hiding behind her and telling the lady to explain it to Rohan instead. Sujin was furious, wondering if the store head was actually kidding with her, and on top of that, why he was hiding behind her when he was the one who was senior and should explain things. But the store head had never, even in his dreams, thought that Rohan would come into the office and actually bring his sword along. Now he was scared for himself and his family. Sujin knew that there was not even a single senior she could trust. Trying to calm the situation, she told Rohan that if he had met their boss, then he should already know that the departmental store company never sells a customer's information. Even though Sujin looked confident while saying these things, after she said them out loud, she was in great trouble, wondering if she would be beheaded. Hearing that, Rohan immediately started pulling out his sword, telling the lady that even though he wanted to settle the score the easy way, it was not possible now. Both Sujin and the store head were terrified, definitely knowing that they were going to die, and they started begging Rohan not to kill them. But instead, he slammed his sword onto the ground, and it fell down in the east direction. We see that Rohan was just checking the direction and decided to find the boy with his intuition technique. Both employees wondered about what was going on, curious about what intuition meant for Rohan. But the store head thought that since sword masters lived completely different lives from them, Rohan might have solved many problems with only his intuitions, which must be incredibly sharp. Sujin, on the other hand, wondered if there was even a real person capable of doing that. As the scene shifts, we see that 2 days have passed and that Chanso had claimed many blocks. Now, a gate appeared for the boy to travel between them, while the cute little hamster was still sitting on the boy's shoulder. Chanso wondered if the person would not be coming. We are told that Sujin had urgently informed Chanso that the sword master named Rohan would be visiting him very soon, and even Chanso was scared because Sujin had sounded so urgent and worried. But the boy also knew that sword masters had no travel restrictions, and even when a delivery arrived in 2 days, the sword master should already be there. Suddenly, a system notification popped up, telling the boy that someone had entered the block. Chanso immediately got up, even surprising Hamdal the hamster while thinking that the sword master must be the devil because the moment he spoke about him, he had finally arrived. But something strange happened. Chanso waited and kept waiting, but no one came out of the door. The boy wondered if some kind of bug was happening in the system because all visitors had to come through the entrance, or so Chanso thought. He rechecked the system again and again while the hamster grew annoyed. Realizing that it was not a system error, Chanso decided to look around the area just in case Rohan had arrived. After walking a few meters, he reached the block's end and saw a huge ripple through the barrier. Chanso was shocked as he saw that the sword master had split the boundary of the block to come in, wondering if that was even possible. Meanwhile, the hamster was really scared, hiding inside the boy's collar as the man emerged from the rift in style, wearing a long black jacket and bodysuit which protected him, with a shiny sword in hand. After having a look at Rohan, Chanso knew that anyone could tell he was a sword master, and a powerful one at that. Meanwhile, Rohan did not waste any time and immediately asked Chanso if he was the cultivator of the Emperor Apple. The hamster grew even more terrified as Rohan came closer, immediately hiding under Chanso's hair, while the boy wondered why the sword master was all the way in the block of abundance. Rohan explained that he had come to buy apples, and Chanso calmly asked how many apples he needed. Rohan reluctantly said he wanted to have 100 or 200 apples if possible, but that was impossible. Even the hamster came out of the boy's hair, wondering about this monstrous amount. Chanso instantly told Rohan that 50 at most was the limit, aside from the supply they already had. Hearing that, Rohan looked sad, which was completely the opposite of what Chanso expected, making him unable to believe that even the sword master Rohan looked gloomy. Thinking it must be his imagination, Chanso tried to continue the conversation, wanting to ask about the price Rohan was willing to pay. Rohan was ready to give the boy the same 200,000 gold per apple that the departmental store charged, but Chanso was shocked, informing Rohan that they did not offer any kind of packaging. Still, Rohan was ready for it, even after being aware that he was paying a bit extra. Now, knowing the price, Chanso wondered if he should push himself and sell 100 apples at once to earn a good amount of money. As the scene shifts, we move out of the forest and come to the abundance area, which was full of baskets. But Chanso kept looking at Rohan's face, realizing that from the moment the man entered the block to now, As they worked, Rohan had not changed his expression even once. This made Chanso wonder if this was the composure of a sword master. But in truth, Rohan was simply oblivious because he just wanted to taste those delicious apples that were making his mouth water. Chanso walked near a giant apple tree and asked Rohan if 50 apples were fine. As the man nodded, Chanso activated the asterisk blessing of abundance skill and cultivated approximately 50 emperor apples, which were shining even when they were natural, tasting heavenly even from the trees. Chanso told Rohan to wait a moment because he needed to harvest them, but since Rohan had no time to waste, he drew his sword and told Chanso to stand back. Chanso did as told, still wondering what the sword master was about to do. Then Rohan started running toward the tree, and with one heavy slash he swung his sword, cutting down all the apples smoothly as they fell due to gravity. At the same time, Rohan activated his inventory bag, making all the apples fall straight inside its infinite space, counting them on the go and not taking even one more than the 50 Chanso promised. Even the boy was shocked, wondering if this skill was actually a skill, or some kind of system bug. After the sale was complete, 10 million gold was deposited into Chanso's account by Rohan. As Chanso turned around, he saw Rohan flip his card and promise that he would return again to buy apples. But no one knew why. Chanso screamed and told Rohan to wait for a moment. It was revealed that the boy was thinking about the bugs from the last area, so he had ordered pest-repelling plants for them. Still, he did not know what kind of block they would be heading to next. He knew that with Rohan along, it would definitely help him a lot in capturing the blocks, since the man even had a free pass for travel. But as Chanso was thinking about it, Rohan was growing impatient. So Chanso immediately asked if Rohan would be interested in any other crops, since he had grown them himself, and was sure Rohan would like them. The man wondered what kind of crops Chanso was selling, and the boy started explaining that he had very delicious potatoes and sweet potatoes, along with beans. But with every item he mentioned, Rohan grew even more annoyed, telling the boy that he was not interested and deciding to head back. Chanso was pale-faced now, knowing that if Rohan left, his plan would be ruined. As Rohan was almost out of the block, Chanso screamed that he had apples, grabbing the sword master's attention and promising him more. Meanwhile, Chanso thought that even though Rohan was strange, he did not seem like a bad person. So Chanso decided to make a proposal, telling Rohan that for a smooth emperor apple supply, he needed to secure another block, and as payment for the apples in the future, Chanso would like to seek Rohan's help in securing the blocks. Hearing this, Rohan's face immediately turned serious, and Chanso wondered if this was too unreasonable a request. Rohan asked if Chanso was really going to give him a smooth supply, signaling with his fingers that he wanted to have 20 of them regularly for his supplies. Chanso guessed this much, and Rohan agreed, slashing the fabric of the barrier once again and taking Chanso with him. The boy immediately noticed that the sword master was moving really fast compared to anywhere else, and Chanso was just barely keeping up behind. Even though he had guessed Rohan would agree, he didn't think they would be going this soon. He wondered just how strong the sword master actually was, and if there was anything that could even scare this man. But lost in his thoughts, Chanso suddenly stepped into a puddle and realized he was again inside a lush forest. He wondered why, if there was so much greenery around, his territory was the only barren one. As he kept dunking his shoes into the mud and swamps, he realized he should have bought boots. Suddenly, a clash echoed, and Chanso wondered if Rohan was all right, knowing it must have been a monster attack. But before the vine monster coming from the trees could strike, Chanso was grabbed by Rohan, who jumped around, deflecting all of the monster's attacks. Rohan calmly told him to stay behind because it was dangerous. But looking at what Rohan just did, Chanso was sure that Rohan was actually the dangerous one. Still, he had never encountered such a monster before. It looked more like a plant and seemed quite vicious. It was a carnivorous plant with dangerous-looking petals that could eat even humans alive. Suddenly, Chanso told Rohan that it was fine, and that this block was the one he would be managing after all, so he had to be powerful and learn how to deal with it. A system notification popped up, telling the boy that he could activate the Submerge Asterisk skill to take control of the block. The boy smiled and told Rohan to leave it to him as he started hacking and slashing his scythe all around, beheading all the monstrous plants, and using the asterisk blessing of abundance so that everything was purified once again. The swampy areas healed, turning greener, and even the water became completely clean, no longer dirtying the boy's boots. As the scene shifted, we saw Sujin flying once again with her winged boots, realizing that every time she got there, she got soaked, which was a real pain. But it wasn't like she could install an entrance gate herself, so she didn't think much of it and instead took off, trying to find Chanso. Sujin was being called out by Chanso as he noticed her in the sky. But as the lady waved and looked down at the boy, she was shocked. Her face suddenly turned fearful as she wondered what Chanso was doing with none other than the sword master Rohan, who, to her surprise, was patting the ground near a tree. Even though she didn't want to, Sujin had witnessed a bizarre sight in front of her, wondering what in the world Rohan was doing. Sujin was in shock as she landed and wondered what on earth had happened on the block. Chanso just smiled and replied that, due to the suggestion of the lady, they were occupying the surrounding blocks, and he figured he would greet her and occupy one at the same time. But Sujin was not worried about occupying the blocks. When Rohan turned around, she heard that her shouting was not helping, so she started whispering, wondering why Chanso was hanging out with Rohan. Hearing that, Chanso remembered a flashback. After finishing off all those plant monsters, Chanso was actually worried that Rohan had been waiting for a while for the apples. But the man decided to finally speak, telling the boy that he was curious about the taste of the apples that would be grown in the swamp. However, that was obvious because Chanso thought that since there was no proper soil to plant trees, there would be no apples. It was all puddles everywhere. But Rohan just took out his sword once again and in one fell swoop, swung it to push away the puddles, immediately clearing the soil beneath them, which had been there but not visible due to the water. Chanso was breathless after seeing this, realizing that this was what people called a once-in-a-lifetime moment. The soil was completely free of impurities and puddles. Knowing that the land was now cultivable, he shivered while telling Rohan that since they would probably be seeing each other often, they could speak comfortably with each other. After planting the tree, Chanso used the blessing of abundance so that the plant could grow into a tree. We returned to the present, where Chanso smiled and told the lady that this was how it had happened. But Sujin was shocked, unable to believe that it was so easy to become friendly with Rohan. She wasn't understanding any of it, but when she looked at the apple tree, she was surprised to notice that the tree had a strange smell. Even though the soil had been cleared, the block area still made the whole tree smell like swamp and mud. Even though it was a bit off, it didn't bother Chanso at all. Sujin, however, distanced herself while the boy explained that maybe the smell was because of the environment, but the apples actually had twice the taste and aroma, except for the foul smell. Depending on where Chanso injected the growth points, the flavor also changed, so he was still experimenting. Chanso calmly took out one emperor apple and wondered if the lady would be willing to try one. But since it smelled bad, the lady decided to pass. Just then, as she was stepping back, her legs touched something. When she looked down, she realized it was the ostrich buttweed monster. Chanso was shocked after hearing such a hilarious name for such a dangerous monster. Sujin thought that the ostrich buttweed monster resembled an ostrich in both behavior and backside and only moved at night. It was notoriously hard to capture, not to mention defeat, yet they were lying there lifeless. Seeing that, Sujin took out a test tube from her bag and dropped a few ounces of the monster's sap into it. She realized that the condition was good and wondered why it was so fresh when the body should have decayed. Looking at the fine amount of liquid she got, Sujin wondered if Chanso had hunted these ostrich buttweed monsters by himself. Chanso agreed reluctantly, but the lady still questioned whether Rohan had helped him or something. Chanso disagreed, telling her that they were quite easy to defeat. Hearing that, the lady immediately put the test tube inside her bag and twisted the boy's hand excitedly, telling him that he would have to sell them. Even though it wasn't Sujin's specialty, she was sure they would fetch a high price. But Chanso screamed as a cracking noise came from his hand, having no chance to escape. He immediately agreed to sell them, and hearing that, the lady let go of his hand. Chanso wondered if it was broken or not while the lady, feeling happy, turned towards the boy, thinking that he was skilled in both combat and farming. Now he even had a swordmaster by his side who enjoyed emperor apples. Sujin remembered that from their first meeting, Chanso had been completely beyond common sense, but she was really glad she met him. because she got 100 emperor apples along with man-eating plant sap, and soon some new crops too, which would make her even richer and more reputable. Meanwhile, we see Chanso calling out to Sujin again and again. As the boy screamed, the lady was startled, wondering if something had happened, immediately blushing as she realized she had been daydreaming. Chanso asked if Sujin had brought the supplies he ordered, since he had to cultivate the pest-repelling plants and build a new house before he returned to the original block. Sujin was still blushing, hurriedly taking out her bag and the supplies she brought. While Chanso wondered why the lady was so flustered, she took out the pest-repelling plant seeds along with the building construction kit. The boy told her to wait a moment, and after a few minutes, a mobile home for adventurers was ready, along with pest-repelling plants including pyrethrum, peppermint, and catnip. Sujin was shocked by what she saw because even though the building kit made sense, Chanso was growing plants instantly that would normally take months. She wondered who he actually was. Sujin was a bit scared after looking at Chanso, while Chanso, on the other hand, was scared for his hand after seeing Sujin's pale face. As the scene shifted, the boy was back at the original block with his portable home. Even though the shrine was still shabby, today marked a historical day. All four creatures were dancing together while a system notification popped up in front of him, asking if he would like to purchase ownership of the block. Chanso agreed, and he was notified that Block 3610E had been affiliated with Abundance. Everyone cheered for him, knowing it was a happy occasion. Finally, 100 ownership tokens had been achieved. Since there was a per-day limit of 10 tokens, it had taken 10 days, but at last, Chanso was officially the landowner of the block, and he paid for it with his own money. He played with all the cute little creatures, including Ari and Doji, while the goddess slept on his thighs. We come to know that a single block usually consists of 100 ownership tokens, and securing them all grants that faction ownership, in this case, the Abundance faction. In the real world, Chanso could barely afford a single room, but somehow gaining ownership of this block felt incredibly rewarding. Now that he had bought it, new features were unlocked, the most important being the block attribute system. It was given as a tip by the system that the attribute Chanso could grant depended on the nature of the block, and according to the hint, one of those abilities supposedly suited the goddess well. The system gave him another option, to grant an attribute to the block with two choices, growth or death. Even Chanso realized that, as expected of the goddess, she could actually be pretty dangerous, so he couldn't let his guard down even for a moment. Since growth seemed better than death, the boy knew it might help the goddess grow too, and he finally chose the growth attribute, which was granted to Block 36N. As the boy left the ruins, he noticed the grass looked a bit greener. Even though not much else had changed, all the creatures seemed energetic and active, while the goddess's skin was shiny. Seeing them all so cute, Chanso decided he would upgrade this attribute whenever possible. Suddenly, a status window popped up, and Chanso read that the listed effects were growth for flora and fauna, skill growth, and spawned monster growth. This was enough to cause chaos in his mind as he wondered if all the immortal demon monsters would also become extremely powerful. The scene shifted to a desolate area once again, where Chanso came with his trusty weapon. Due to the drastic attribute, there was both good and bad news. The bad news was that the immortal demons had already gained the growth effect and were coming at him again. The good news was that they were still manageable for now, and he could still defeat them in one go with the mass decapitate attack. The growth attribute had also boosted point rewards, giving Chanso even more. But as he turned around, he suddenly saw Swordmaster Rohan there. The boy wondered when Rohan had arrived, and the man replied that it was just now. Chanso nagged Rohan for still not being able to drop the honorifics, even though Rohan was still getting used to it. Not wasting any time, Chanso realized that Rohan coming to see him meant he had run out of apples. But Rohan told Chanso that run out wasn't the right word. It had been less than a week since he bought his second batch. Chanso was really worried, wondering if one day he would see a headline saying Swordmaster Rohan died from eating Emperor apples, since he consumed over 10 a day. Chanso dismissed the thought and asked how many apples Rohan needed this time. Rohan gave the same answer, the more, the better. Chanso informed him that the flavor had changed slightly due to the block's new attribute, asking if that was okay since they tasted a bit different. When Rohan said nothing, Chanso decided to let him sample them for free. Rohan agreed. The scene then shifted to the apple tree, where, on a peaceful afternoon, every creature along with the goddess was enjoying a picnic. The whole group looked happy and peaceful, but the narrator wondered if they would still be smiling when the next event arrived. As the scene shifted again, we saw Chanso and Rohan approaching the tree. The creatures were shocked as the goddess hid behind the giant doji. Chanso wondered why the goddess and everyone were present in the new block. Meanwhile, Ari wondered who the man with the apostle was, since she sensed something ominous, guessing that maybe the giant man was a butcher who came to do bad things. But the man immediately drew his sword in front of Ari, scaring her. Rohan told Chanso seriously that he was lucky to have such interesting familiars with him. But as the swordmaster drew his sword again, Chanso screamed for him to wait, yet the man didn't listen and swung his sword in one fell swoop. Acting on instinct, Chanso immediately got down and protected all the creatures, ready to take the hit himself. He was shocked, however, to see an apple fall in front of him, followed by many others. Chanso realized that Rohan was just trying to harvest apples. He wondered if it would kill Rohan to warn them first. Chanso thought maybe Rohan hadn't realized the goddess's presence yet, and since he called them familiars, that made sense. But Rohan suddenly spoke, telling Chanso that once he swung his sword, he knew the block had the growth attribute. Rohan wanted Chanso to let him stay there, saying he was even ready to pay while he trained on the block. Chanso was shocked, wondering what kind of payment Rohan meant and how much it would be. Rohan, with a serious face, told him he would pay approximately 10 million won per month. Hearing that, everyone except Doji screamed at the amount of money the swordmaster offered, while the pig just kept eating apples. Chanso immediately grabbed Rohan's hand and gave him a vigorous handshake, welcoming the valued customer he had just gained in his humble abode. Chanso was pleased when he realized that the money sword master Rohan was spending on Emperor apples was just pocket change for him. Both the cute hamster and Chanso were crying after realizing that. Looking at them, Rohan wondered if our boy agreed or not. Chanso instantly agreed to it, but still wondered how dangerous the training of the sword master actually was. He thought that maybe the training would split the ground in half or make the sky and earth collide. Rohan calmly refused all these wild claims, but our boy still continued to wonder if the training would involve objects smashing and flying around. He quickly denied it but remained curious. Chanso was in a dilemma, telling Rohan that he was not going to give away his friendly monsters who were regulars because he did not have infinite points and needed them. After Rohan wanted more Emperor apples, the man reluctantly disagreed with whatever Chanso said, telling him that he did not need anything. Instead, he pointed to the corner of the block, telling the boy that he should just give him a little space in that corner. Chanso wondered if it would really be enough for training for such a high-level sword master, and Rohan just nodded. After thinking for a bit, Chanso decided that if Rohan was fine with it, then there was no problem. But suddenly he stopped Rohan and said there was something else he wanted besides money. When Rohan turned around, Chanso continued, saying he would like to ask Rohan for protection. The essence of the block world was actually a game of territory, and even Chanso never knew when the conflict would escalate and his territory would be in danger. If the world-renowned swordsman Rohan would protect the abundance block, then Chanso would feel absolutely secure because the man was a level 100 individual and a 9-star swordsman. Chanso was even ready to reduce the pay, even when the amount was already quite large and not profitable for him, but he knew his first priority was to become a returnee. With Rohan protecting him, he would be safe. However, Rohan had his own conditions. He agreed to Chanso's request only on the condition that the boy would have to strengthen the growth skill effect inside the block, and then Rohan would consider it. Chanso smiled, thinking it was an easy condition, and told the man that he would strengthen the growth with 50,000 points every day and also provide 10 Emperor apples each time the growth gave extra output to him. But another shocking question came Chanso's way as Rohan asked if they could also buy additional apples separately for consumption. The boy started sweating while telling the man, of course they could, though he wondered how many apples Rohan would eat in a single day. As the scene moved on, we see that Ari was not too happy with the apostle's decision. her evil aura faintly rising while wondering what the apostle was mumbling about. Meanwhile, Doji also realized, with his little brain, that living with the strongest swordsman in this block was dangerous because Rohan would be giving death stares everywhere. Chanso thought that with the sword master protecting them, the goddess would like it very much. But as he turned around, he saw that both Ari and Doji had fallen into sadness, and the goddess was trying to calm them down. Chanso wondered if they were just shy or if something else had happened. Knowing that Rohan had already seen them, Chanso introduced all the creatures as his familiars, hoping they would introduce themselves. As Rohan approached them, Chanso told them they should greet the sword master too. But the goddess, along with the poor little pig and chick, turned pale, terrified by the man's deadly stare. It was so bad that Ari grabbed the goddess's hand and ran away with Doji as fast as they could. Rohan looked disappointed by the creature's behavior, so Chanso tried to calm him down, saying they were just shy and would take time to warm up. But suddenly, Chanso turned around and told Rohan that he had a first request to make. As the scene shifted, we came to the 35N and 9E carnivorous plant block, which had been completely cleared with just one swing of the sword master's blade. Chanso was collecting the apples, and even though Rohan was helping, he was eating them instantly. Looking at that, the boy wondered if Rohan had some kind of apple fetish. Changing the topic, Chanso announced that if Rohan bought the remaining rights to the block, it would become the land of abundance and even more profitable. Chanso was about to agree to the contract of abundance and the block when Rohan suddenly took out his sword and told Chanso to be alert because something was lurking around. As both Chanso and Rohan looked around, the man spotted something, and Chanso turned, wondering what it was. Both men were shocked when they saw a cute little black cat rolling around on the ground. They had expected everything but not a cat. Since Chanso had never seen other animals around the block, he realized it must be a friendly familiar like the cute little hamster. The cat looked so playful that she didn't seem dangerous. Even when Rohan told Chanso to wait, not feeling right about it, Chanso still started walking toward the cat, saying she seemed surprisingly calm and cute. But as soon as he touched the cat's fur, its color changed, and it started scaring Chanso. Rohan turned around, knowing he had been right all along. Chanso was terrified as the cat began emanating a deadly aura. He immediately hid behind Rohan and opened his system to find out what it was. It turned out that the cute little cat, now angry, was actually the apostle of negativity and had declared war on the block, all because Chanso had touched its fur without permission. Chanso was almost crying while asking Rohan if such a cute cat could really be the apostle of negativity. Even Rohan was confused, wondering what nonsense Chanso was talking about. The boy explained that somehow he had declared war with the apostle of negativity and that the cat was angry because he had touched it. Still, he couldn't comprehend how the cat suddenly went to war, and now his life had become a struggle with this cute little creature. Rohan immediately told the boy to stop crying and get ready to fight, because once the apostle of negativity declared war, soldiers would soon appear through the block boundaries. And of course, they would all be humans since they would get quests out of it. Chanso's face turned pale as he realized what that meant. Killing monsters was one thing, but killing humans, even in this world, was horrifying. It would be like genocide. Rohan explained that while they could kill the human invaders, they would also resurrect in the shrine. Chanso didn't believe it at first, but Rohan said that even though the negativity faction could be killed, they could respawn like at a safe point. Chanso knew that the shrine was where he had kept the goddess along with his other familiars, and if someone slipped up even once, it would be game over for him. Still, he had no choice but to protect the goddess of abundance. Deciding to give it his all, Chanso took out his trusty weapon, flames burning in his eyes, wondering if Rohan would help him in the fight too. The sword master agreed to assist if it became necessary. Hearing that, Chanso hurried to prepare. As the scene shifted, a giant blue portal opened directly over the abundance block, and multiple undead poured out carrying various weapons. Behind them were 3 humans in a team. One of them, with wavy hair, called out to the Emperor Apple Grower through a microphone, daring him to reveal his form. The scene then cut to reality inside the headquarters of a departmental store, where Sajin was talking to someone, admitting that she had indeed said the lady was remembering something. Even though she was scared of talking to Rohan, she had mentioned it and asked about how amazing Chanso actually was. Rohan also replied that he was really special, but both of them were talking about different things. The lady was referring to Chanso's fighting skills, while Rohan was referring to the Emperor apples. Back in the present, the lady thought Chanso was not only a master farmer, but also a strong warrior. Still, she wondered how he could be skilled in both swordsmanship and farming at the same time, especially since he was only in his late 20s. To master two completely different fields at a perfect level was nearly impossible unless he was some kind of reincarnation or summoned human. It didn't make sense to her. She thought maybe the boy had an artifact blessed by a god, or perhaps one found in the remains of a dead deity, something that allowed him to borrow divine power. But still, Sajin knew that if the artifact was not well matched with its god, it would be hard to use. She stopped thinking altogether as her brain felt like it was melting, admitting that she had no idea what was going to happen next or why a farmer was suddenly living with a sword master. But as Sajin tried to calm herself, chaos erupted. Someone suddenly crashed through the wall into the lady's room. It was the S-ranked alchemist Hong. He looked at her once, then lowered his gaze, though Sajin had already noticed that the man had been glaring at her. Wondering why he had come, the lady braced herself for trouble. But Hong immediately took out a vial of ostrich buttweed sap, the one the lady had brought earlier, and shouted, demanding to know where she had gotten it from. The lady was completely shocked, starting to mumble and cry, wondering why things like this always happened to her and what she had done wrong. As multiple undead skeletons started appearing from the portal along with some humans, Chanso looked at all of them, wondering if this was just a small reconnaissance team instead of a full-blown war. But Rohan didn't care, continuing to eat his apples. Chanso had strange thoughts already, honestly worried about what would happen if the undead were actually a full civilization with modern weaponry. But this small team of undead and a few humans looked manageable to him. Suddenly, someone called out for the cultivator of the Emperor apples to show himself. It was none other than the leader of the human group, who was getting annoyed by the fact that the swamp was full of puddles. He didn't want to make this affair exhausting for anyone and demanded the cultivator come out already. Chanso, on the other hand, wondered why these humans were so wide open. He asked Rohan what the team was thinking and if they were being careless, since they could resurrect anyway. Even Rohan agreed with what Chanso said while still eating his apples. It was frustrating for Chanso to have so little information about the situation, but he remained calm because he had Rohan, the swordmaster, on his side, and the man was more than capable. Chanso knew that even if things went south, they would be fine, because he was counting on the swordmaster to fix everything in the end. As the scene shifted, the leader of the team was shocked when he saw Chanso walk out of the swamps, wondering what was up with him and why he was alone. And to add to that, why he only had a scythe, which was also a rusty one. The leader reluctantly asked Chanso if he was in charge of the place, wanting to stop wasting time. He ordered Chanso to bring him all the apples he had cultivated, but Chanso grabbed his trusty scythe, which made even the undead uneasy. The leader mocked him, asking if he couldn't see how many of them were present in this small district, wondering what the boy could possibly do with just a rusty scythe. Chanso, however, was observing everything carefully. He realized that the leader wasn't summoning any new undead, and even the team members weren't preparing any kind of long-range attack. Instead, the leader was just focused on threatening him, declaring that they were from the Denial faction and were ready to torment anyone until death to get what they wanted. Chanso smiled nervously and replied that he had heard Denial was one of the top factions, so he had been nervous at first. But now that he had seen them, he realized they were just thugs leaning on connections with no real plan. This shocked the leader, who couldn't believe what Chanso had just said. But deep inside, Chanso knew the real Denial faction was far away, while the strongest swordmaster was right here. Now the team leader was angry, warning Chanso that this was his last chance and demanding he bring the Emperor apples immediately, or else things would get bad. But Chanso interrupted, telling the man that if he wanted apples so badly, he should go to a department store and not cause a scene here, because it wasn't ethical or professional at all. The leader continued to threaten him, asking if he was ready to face the consequences, but Chanso went full savage, saying that the leader asked too many questions without anything to show for it. He told him that if he wanted someone to answer every question he had, he should go ask his mom, but then immediately apologized, saying that there was no way his mom was in this world anymore. That was enough to completely shatter the leader's morale. Even the other team members were stunned, wondering how someone could say something like that. It was harsh, and Chanso shouldn't have crossed the line by joking about the leader's mom, even if they had invaded the space. Realizing what he had said, Chanso tried to clarify, apologizing and explaining that by this world, he meant the dispatched world, not the real one. He wasn't trying to insult him, but just stating a fact. But it was too late. The leader was infuriated, ordering all the undead to skin Chanso alive. Even though Chanso kept explaining that it wasn't what he meant, he knew it was useless now. The scene shifted to the alchemy headquarters, where Sujin was being interrogated by Hong, who wanted the lady to tell him one thing: whether the poisonous sap had been extracted by Rohan by any chance. When Sujin disagreed, Hong pressed further, asking if any other master had done it. But as Sujin refused to disclose anything, Hong realized he was being hasty. Client information was supposed to be confidential. He apologized for asking unnecessary questions to a lady because of the special labor costs, wondering if the staff would still sell as normal and at no additional fee. Sujin was shocked, wondering if she should charge more for the sap, but Hong told her not to mind it, realizing it was a relief. He told the lady they couldn't keep receiving supplies if they included a master's labor cost. But deep inside, Hong knew he couldn't just let this go, because the ostrich grass monster's sap had a high degradation rate, making it difficult to maintain purity, along with the challenge of harvesting it in the first place. However, the sap Sujin had brought from Chanso maintained a higher purity than any they had seen before, making it the purest ever in the real world. Hong didn't know what kind of miracle the lady had performed, but he took out a contract and gave it to Sujin, asking if she could continue supplying the poisonous sap to them. Sujin was reluctant, telling Hong that she would have to ask, but still agreed. Hong insisted that they should at least sign a provisional contract, and while smiling and adjusting his glasses, he told Sujin to convey his message to the cultivator, that the alchemy faction would always welcome him if he ever wanted to join. As the scene shifted, we returned to the swamp zone where Lin was standing while every other adventurer charged at him with insane speed and weapons in hand. The team leader told his members they should execute the one who mocked both the denial faction and their suffering. Lin kept repeating that it wasn't what he meant, but even he knew he couldn't talk his way out of this, deciding to clean up first. The team leader, on the other hand, was uneasy, realizing that Lin wasn't even nervous and wondering why he was acting so confident. Lin joked while getting ready to defend against the skeletons, wondering if all these undead were from the same factory or something. He immediately activated mass decapitation, swinging his scythe in every direction with a smile, knowing that he had cut all the undead perfectly down at once. The team leader stood frozen, unable to believe that his strong skeletons had fallen without even a fight. Meanwhile, Lin further intimidated him, saying the skeletons were a lot weaker than expected, maybe because they were nothing but bones to begin with. Smiling, Lin placed a foot on one of the fallen skeletons and asked if the team surrendered. The leader wasn't ready to back down, but looking around, he saw that everyone else was ready to run the moment they got the chance. Knowing there was no other choice, he snatched the locket from around his neck. Even though he hadn't wanted to use his trump card so soon, he broke it, a purple teleportation device that summoned a monster. As a teleportation circle appeared on the ground, the leader called out his monster, Heracles. A hulking undead creature with both a human and lion head appeared before Lin. Without hesitation, Lin remarked that the leader should ask the original owner's opinion on that copied name, since now he couldn't complain if he got sued for defamation for making something so ugly out of such a famous name. The leader maintained his fake smile, telling Lin not to insult his masterpiece, claiming it was the ultimate weapon, worth 30 million gold and 100,000 points. He immediately ordered Heracles to tear Lin to shreds, but Lin stayed calm, calculating what 30 million gold and 100,000 points meant, about the price of 200 emperor apples. Just as the ugly monster attacked, Lin countered and evaded every strike. When the monster lunged desperately, Lin thanked it for coming down to his size, and as soon as its head came within reach, used decapitation, cutting the head clean off. The leader was devastated. His Heracles, the culmination of 10 years of work, was gone. He turned toward a girl with purple hair, asking why she was just standing there watching. The girl, named Kim, the apostle of denial, reluctantly told him that he was the one who stepped up so confidently without gauging the enemy's strength, and now had no right to complain. Even when she decided to act, she demanded extra payment for it, since her role was only to guide, not to fight. Meanwhile, Lin jumped away from the monster's ugly body, wondering if this fight was finally over. Even for him, a three-phase battle was a bit much. But then he saw Kim stepping to the front, even though her role was supposed to be in the back. Suddenly, Kim did something unexpected, as the system started warning Lin that the upper-end apostle was using a skill named Denial of Life, which would place a curse upon him. Reading the notification, Lin realized the girl had been planning to step in all along if things turned dangerous.